All right. Well, thank you for coming to our public workshop / special meeting. Because we have not achieved a quorum today, we're not going to be doing it as a special meeting. We'll be just leaning in on the public workshop style of this event. So we'll have our presenters come up and make presentations, and after each presentation, we'll have a public comment. My note to our directors that are present both in the room and online are to please not discuss amongst yourselves. Just wait for the public comment time. We'll do a priority of board members in the room, then online, and then we'll go to public comment that are either in the room or online for members of the public. And that's how we'll proceed today. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dawn.
Thank you so much. And I want to encourage our board members to come up to the front if you're up for it. We have a lot of room. I know we're going to have a few folks trickling in, a few folks that are in traffic, and we have quite a few folks also joining via Zoom that will be listening in. But we encourage board members to, come on up if you'd like to sit near the front. This is all for you. We're here to do a deep dive on a couple of topics. And I just wanted to start off with setting the stage for today. We have a lot of key decisions to make in the next couple of months. And today is an opportunity to really lay a foundation and a threshold and a basis of common understanding for us to work from in making the decisions that are going to be coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to start off with a deep overview of our strategic plan for energy services. And with that, we're going to really look a lot at the programs that we have up and running. We're going to be looking to the board to make some key policy decisions in the next month regarding our programs and how we might want to transform, continue, adjust as we move into our budget setting for the next fiscal year. We're also going to then move into our integrated resource planning side of the business, and that's where we're going to really talk about procurement. How do we plan our procurement? How do we evaluate what procurement needs are going to be over the next 10 years? And then looking closely at what we want to do in the next year or two to align our goals with our budget, with our community needs. So there's a lot of intersecting topics that we'll have an opportunity to really get into today. We'll have a lunch break, and then we're going to dive into customer rates, billing, and cost context. And we'll be hearing from Zay Perrin, who's our head of customer operations, and he's going to give us an overview of what current rate comparisons look like. And this will be really important information for us to kind of have in the back of our mind as we begin to think about rate setting for the coming year and budget setting for the coming year. Workshop number 2, coming up in a couple of weeks, is going to be a completely different set of topics where we're going to really dive deeply into some of the decision making. We'll be presenting a proposed rate reduction to the board at that time with 5 different options that need to be considered. And we'll also be looking at some elements of our budget setting process that's going to begin in earnest later in February with our February board meeting. As a reminder, our fiscal year starts on April 1, and so we need to have an approved budget by our March board meeting. So it's not a lot of time. We're kind of on the beginning of the runway now, and this is our opportunity to really get a handle on all the elements that are going to be intersecting and coming into play as we make decisions about rates, programs, and budget setting for the year ahead. So I'm grateful and honored that we have some of our esteemed staff here. We have some folks that have been working on these issues for many years, and I'm excited to hear from them on these topics. I'm going to start us off by inviting Jamie Tuckey to come up. She's our Chief Customer Officer. She's been with MCE since before day one and is going to kick us off with a dive into our strategic plan for energy services. Thank you, Jamie.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for getting the slides up, and thanks for the introduction, Dawn. I know that I've met all of you at some point in the past, but I wanted to reintroduce myself because I missed much of last year because I was on maternity leave. I came back in the fall, and I'm really happy to be back with you here today. As Dawn noted, I'm our Chief Customer Officer. I helped form our organization in 2008, and so I have been helping to build and sustain MCE for almost 2 decades now. And in my work, I focus on the customer and public-facing side. So that includes customer programs, customer operations, public affairs, and strategic initiatives. And I'm excited to walk you through our strategic plan for energy services today. The plan was included in your packet, and we really view it as a living document. It's a roadmap for our day-to-day work across the organization and for all of our teams to help support. We update the document at least once a year, so at the beginning of every year and then throughout as needed. And let's go into the next slide and we can talk about some of the content. I will say I think the strategic plan for energy services is a really nice document to set the foundation of the conversation for the budget that we'll be having over the next several weeks. That's because the plan speaks specifically about the energy services that we offer to customers and also our programs. And of course, a lot of our budget goes into that and deciding how we want to invest at MCE and where we want to invest to support our mission and our customers. So when you take a look at the plan, you'll see that the first section is about our service area. That's obviously very important to define who are our customers, what are their needs, which communities are we serving, and we use that information to tailor and design our programs to benefit our unique communities. We have a section on energy equity, which is really important and one of MCE's core values since the founding of our organization. We want to make sure that we're thinking about energy equity in all of our work and how we can include folks who need to benefit from these programs the most and historically maybe have not had a chance to benefit or who have been negatively impacted through the fossil fuel industry. So our energy equity section takes a look at a whole bunch of stuff, but the first is defining who are our priority populations. What do those customers need? What are their unique situations throughout our service area? We talk about language access. We want to make sure that folks who don't speak English or have English as a second language know about MCE, that they have the tools and resources so that they can participate as well and be aware of their options. We talk about supplier diversity. We submit a report every year in March to the California Public Utilities Commission that highlights all of the work that we do with diverse suppliers and contractors. So we want to make sure we're supporting small local businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, LGBTQ-owned businesses. And we also have a section about partner engagement. So you all are familiar with our Community Power Organization, a group of advocates and organizations who help support MCE and determine how we can do better in our communities and support this goal of equity. We also have a section on working with environmental justice organizations throughout our agency and how we can partner as well. And that was an initiative that we really dug into last year to partner with those environmental justice or EJ groups so that we could support each other and build on this energy equity work. The next section in the plan is about electric supply options, which is, of course, the meat of our organization and what we do. So it defines all of our electricity choices for customers, what their options are, and goes high level into the procurement strategy. The reason that it's high level is because this area of the work is really defined in our integrated resource planning efforts. And that's on the agenda today for us to talk about as well. But in this electric supply options section, we also talk about the state of the market, like what types of things are happening that are driving our strategies in this area. So state and regional policy, and those are things that we know like the carbon-free or renewable targets that are required of us in the state. Resource adequacy changes, hourly emission reporting is going to change soon as well. So we need to consider not just what's happening right now, but what will be happening in the future in regards to our work. And then, of course, there's a really big section on customer programs. We have so many programs that we offer to our customers, and this plan really dives into each of those programs. It determines our goals, our metrics, key performance indicators, what our funding sources is, how much money we need for these programs to operate, and we use that to track, to determine what our goals are, and then later track progress towards each of those goals. And then finally, the plan includes a section on risk mitigation strategies. Every year, we want to consider what's happening, what types of risks are we facing, what types of risks do we think we could be facing, and prepare in advance to think about what steps we are already taking to mitigate those or will need to if some of those risks do arise. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, I want to take a second to talk about our agency priorities. You all know that we have our vision and mission for the organization, and we also have agency priorities that we refer to that are directly in support of the mission and vision. They are relatively stable year over year, but we do make adjustments as needed over the years if there are new priorities that we need to address or if there are any shifts in our environment. With those agency priorities, we create goals that all of our departments help support, and from those goals, we have key metrics and performance indicators. So let's take a look at each of these priorities and how they help us to achieve our mission of tackling climate change. The first is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through strategic programs and energy service options, maximizing both renewable and carbon-free sources. I think this is like the foundation of what we're doing at MCE with our energy services and our programs. The second is to foster equity by focusing on inclusive participation and equitable access to clean energy programs and benefits. Again, we've talked a lot about equity, but we want to ensure that we use equity as a lens for all of the decisions at our work at MCE. The third is to strengthen energy affordability by expanding access to cost-saving programs and advocating for fair rates to lower customer costs. And of course, this conversation is becoming even more critical as we are seeing the current rate environment with costs increasing for customers and why we see that theme come up again and again. And we'll be talking about rates later today. We'll be talking in the coming weeks about rate proposals for reducing rates. We know that the PCIA has a really big impact on cost competitiveness for our customers. And we also are thinking about rate stability here. And, directly related to your budget, one of the things that your board has approved over the last couple of years is the MCE CARES credit, which gives a monthly discount to customers who are on the CARE or FARA discount program. That's the standardized discount program that you see on your bill. And it's an extra boost to help customers to save. So that's something that your board will consider or can consider again this year. The next agency priority is to amplify our impact by using our funds wisely and pursuing diverse funding, innovative finance strategies, and prudently diversified investments. And this is really about maximizing the public value of every dollar that we invest in MCE. We have gone after tens of millions of dollars in grants to help support our work, our customer programs, and have been very successful there. And I think this is something that's always been true about MCE, is being efficient and impactful with the resources that we have. The next is number 5, to inspire others to take action to confront the climate crisis by telling our story. And in my role as Chief Customer Officer, I really love this one. I think storytelling is very important for helping folks to understand what it is that we're offering at MCE, how they can connect to it, how it relates to their own values. And one of the stories that I like to tell is our launch, and we talk about that a lot, but I think it's really important because when we launched, there were no other CCAs. This model didn't exist. And since that time, there have been over 24 CCAs across the state. who have launched and who have followed the model that MCE created. So we've made a really big impact beyond just our service area, and that's what this priority is about. It's about telling our story and inspiring others to take action so that we can deepen our mission to tackle climate change. The sixth priority is to achieve operational excellence and ensure peak efficiency and effectiveness. This has a lot to do, and also fostering an engaging employee experience. So MCE is a people-first organization, externally in our communities and also internally. And we have always had a value of doing the very best that we can. We always strive to be as excellent as we can be in our work. And so we want to continue aiming for this priority. And the last priority here is to strengthen governance practices and support shared understanding with the board, staff, and the public. And this really reflects where we are as an organization today, a mature organization that has grown substantially. We have over 600,000 customers, and we're working in a complex environment. So as we've grown, I think the importance of having a really strong team of staff and also a strong board, strong communications, governance, transparency for the public has only increased and continued to grow. So we really want to make sure that we're working hard in this area and doing a great job at it. We want to make sure that MCE is as trusted and strong internally as we are ambitious in our programs and the services that we offer to our customers. So I think these priorities do a great job of telling the story of who MCE is today and who we have been in the past. And you can think about these agency priorities as another lens or filter when you're thinking about the budget and where we're spending funds and dollars to support MCE's work. Next slide, please. Thanks. All right, I want to get into risks and mitigation. The slides that you see here cover. I have two slides on risks and mitigation, but these cover each of our identified key risks and mitigation efforts. And instead of going through each of these one by one, I'm going to highlight, I think, a couple that are really prominent and more of an issue in our current environment. The first one that I want to cover is the supply and demand imbalance. And I think we're all familiar with this, but this is really about timing. It's not about whether we have enough power on the grid. It's about whether we have the right sources available on the grid when it's needed the most. And it's the 4 to 9 p.m. peak period that we often talk about, where solar production is waning as the sun goes down and energy demands are increasing as we go home and we're plugging in our EVs or we're doing our laundry and running our dishes, turning on the lights. And it creates this supply and demand imbalance that has a lot of impacts across California and for MCE. It impacts the cost for MCE. The cost of power is more expensive. It impacts the cost of power for customers. It's also more expensive. It can create greenhouse gas emissions when there are supply imbalances and an equity issue. And that's because if there isn't enough power on the grid during these peak periods, the California Independent State Operator will flip on natural gas peaker plants, as they're called, and they can be turned on quickly and supply power to the grid if it's needed. And of course, the natural gas peaker plants are going to be producing air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and the equity component is that the overwhelming majority, it's something like 80% of them, are located in state-designated disadvantaged communities. So those are places where there are people who have lower incomes, often people of color, and they're actually experiencing poor air quality and the health impacts of that as well. So there are numerous reasons why this is important, and it's a really key driver for a lot of our customer programs, talking about mitigation strategies. We develop lots of programs that help encourage customers to reduce energy use during that time through our virtual power plant programs, energy efficiency, providing customers with support to help install storage paired with their solar. And on the energy services side, the procurement side, we're also procuring 24/7 available energy like geothermal, getting more of that type of energy into our grid, and also investing in long duration storage or storage combined with solar. The next risk that I'll highlight on this slide is about financial constraints. And obviously that's relevant today given that we're in a budget workshop. And we'll be talking again, like I said, later about PCIA, customer rates, and the proposed rate reductions. But we're really in a tight financial environment with market volatility, volatility with the PCIA rates from PG&E, and growing affordability concerns. There's also possibilities of supply shortages and increasing demand from electrification from our customers, which could create a strain on resources. And so the mitigation for this really comes down to maintaining strong reserves, protecting our credit rating, relying on grants and external sources of funding, and being really thoughtful and prudent about how and where we invest our funds. Next slide, please. Okay, so next slide on risks and mitigation. This is the last slide on this section. And the first, I'll highlight the first one on this table, which is governance, trust, and public confidence. MCE is operating in a really complex governance environment. One, we have a large service area. We have almost 40 communities and a large board representing representing our communities. And we also have complex rules and regulations in the state of California and regionally that we need to follow. And that requires that we have really clear roles, consistent information to support policymaking and decision-making, and having a shared understanding between the board, staff, and the public. And when we have misalignment, it can create a lot of problems. It can slow things down on decision-making and getting work done towards our mission. It can create confusion, and honestly, it can erode confidence in the public and with our stakeholders as well. So our mitigation here is really focused on having transparent public dialogue. Also, educating the board. We know this is a lot of work, and that's part of the reason that we're doing these workshops. It's not just a lot of work, but it's a lot of content to dig into, and we really appreciate that so many of you are digging into it so deeply and really understanding the ins and outs so that you can help with decision-making and guiding us towards achieving our mission. We also want to make sure that when we are communicating with our customers, that we're doing so in a way that's simple and clear and accurate and easy to understand. The last one that I'll highlight on this slide is market dynamics. And the risk here is that volatility in energy markets could negatively impact our procurement. And we mitigate this. This is an ongoing risk, but we mitigate this through diversified procurement, having long-term contracts, considering possible asset ownership, and continuously monitoring what's happening in the market. And we talk more about this as well in our integrated resources plan, which, as you know, is on the agenda. Next slide, please. Great. So the last thing that I want to talk about related to, before I hand it off to someone else to talk about customer programs, is energy service and the energy service options. So this slide provides an overview of all of the choices that our customers have to choose from. And there are many, and they have grown over the years. I want to highlight that as of December, our participation rate across the MCE service area has hit an all-time high. It's at about 87%, representing more than 600,000 customer accounts. And as you'd expect, the vast majority of those customers are enrolled in light green. That is our default service option. We have committed to having light green be at least 60% renewable. And customers who start electricity service because they move into a new building or a new home automatically start with light green unless they choose another option. And I think all of you know that when MCE starts service in a new community, light green is also the service that everyone gets enrolled into unless they choose something else. Participation in deep green also continues to be very strong. We have nearly 40,000 accounts, for our 100% renewable deep green. And I want to highlight an equity component here, which is that customers who are enrolled in CARE and FARA can have deep green at no extra cost. So we do not charge the premium to those customers who choose to be in this program. I want to highlight Local Soul. It continues to be fully subscribed, and it's such a neat service option. It's a small service option. There are less than 350 customers enrolled, and that's at max capacity. And it's for 100% solar that comes from a project in Novato, the Novato Coulee Quarry. And it's connected to a 20-year feed-in tariff contract that we have. And the rates in that contract are flat over those 20 years and guaranteed. And we pass those that guaranteed rate on to our customers. When we launched Local Soul a number of years ago, it was the most expensive service option in our community. And that's because it was tied to this local project. But over time, as rates have gone up in other areas, Local Soul has stayed steady, and it has actually become one of the lowest cost and sometimes the lowest cost option in our service area. And that's including against PG&E as well. I also want to highlight Green Access, which continues to be a really important equity-focused offering. We offer 100% renewable at a 20% discount. This is for folks who are on limited income and have the CARE or FARA discount and are also located in a state-designated disadvantaged community. And we have close to 6,000 customers participating in that program. I think that's one of our clearest examples of how we're combining our affordability, equity, and clean energy goals into one service option. And then lastly, I'll touch on the new 24/7 green pilot that your board approved last year. This is still in the early stages, and we'll be sharing more information with you as that project or that service develops over time. So I do want to offer folks to ask questions if they have any of me now. You can also wait until the end. So I'm going to do a pause here, but I also want to introduce my colleague, Alice Havenar-Doughton. She's going to talk to us about the customer programs elements of the strategic plan. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or we can wait until afterwards. Yes?
Can I just get confirmation on the light green? You said that was default.
Oh.
Sorry, thank you. Okay, is it on? All right, for the light green, I just want to make sure that I understand it. You said it was a default service. So if I'm a new resident, this is automatic, or do I still first get the option? Is PG&E the first option and then I have to select MCE, or is it I'm a new person and it's MCE automatically?
It's MCE automatically.
Okay.
And we do send, we have legally required notices that we send to our customers. We send them in the mail and via email when they start service to let them know that they're starting with MCE. We share the other options as well. And we also let them know that if they aren't interested in MCE service, that they can opt out for PG&E. And I think, you know, one perspective I'll add that I think people often don't think about when we say, oh, light green is the default and you automatically start. Before MCE, PG&E was the default and there was no choice. And so like, no matter what, you're automatically going to start in some service. And in our communities, I think luckily you start with MCE, which is great because it's cleaner energy and we're a not-for-profit public agency. And so a portion of the dollars that you spend on your monthly bill, instead of going to the shareholder profit, is going to be invested here locally in your own community.
And so that's, they turned the volume up. So then that's the default for new individuals. And then and I'm looking at my own city here for Richmond, when MCE came about, if you were already a resident, were already with PG&E, because I remember a long time ago, I had to make that choice. So did we flip everybody over to MCE all of a sudden? And then you had to choose to go back to PG&E?
When a community joins MCE and becomes a member, we choose a service date. It's almost always been in the spring, typically April. And we send notices to everyone in that community starting several months in advance, letting them know that there will be a change in their service. And that change is that they do automatically switch to MCE. We send notices, but we also do a really in-depth community outreach plan. We do marketing and advertising and, you know, do city council meetings. You probably remember us at some of your city council meetings. And then during that month, on everyone's scheduled bill date, they do automatically switch over to light green unless they choose another option.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
I'm curious on when we look at the overall, the priorities, those 7 key priorities, are those in priority order or are those kind of shared that we need to kind of balance? Because I feel as we go through the next month or two, this will be kind of the key, one of the key decisions we're going to make is how we balance these different priorities. So are those in any particular order or those are just kind of our tenets?
Not ordered. They're not necessarily ordered in priority.
Okay.
They're all important. And I think some of them, depending on what you're considering, are going to be more important or less important based on the decision that you're looking at. I know it is a lot to consider, but I think they all are very important in their own right.
Okay. Thanks.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for the presentation. I wanted to go back to the mission statement because it seems now the mission is to confront the climate crisis by eliminating fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, producing renewable energy, and creating equitable community benefits.
Yes.
I was looking back, and at least a few years ago, the mission seemed to be to address climate change by reducing energy-related greenhouse gas emissions with renewable energy and energy efficiency at cost-competitive rates. And so the cost-competitive rates at some point seems to have been either eliminated or downgraded in terms of priority. Can you sort of elaborate on when that happened, what the board discussion was around that?
So I think the language, and I don't have the mission in front of me now, refers to stable and affordable rates. Is that what you said?
It doesn't say anything according to what I'm reading here.
So the strategic plan is something that we look at every year. And a number of years ago, every year we look at our mission statement, our vision statement. I think over time, as MCE has grown as an organization, grown in complexity and scale, we do consider our mission and vision. And the mission was updated through an internal strategic plan process. We had a consultant at some point who worked with the organization internally, helped us to review everything, come up with our goals, our objectives, and part of that was considering our mission and vision as well. And I think Dawn wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I'll just add that if you can go to the slide on the agency priorities, you'll see that affordability is number 3 there. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff to fit into a mission and to a list of priorities, but affordability is still top of mind.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, I think one of the things we thought about with the mission is that it was very long. I don't know which mission statement you read right now, but I think it was a couple of sentences long. And we tried to simplify it and also make some aspects of it more bold. Like instead of just addressing climate change, it was tackling climate change and what felt inspiring and what we were trying to really do at MCE at that time. And I think Dawn has a great point that even if it's not in our mission, it is always going to be a priority. We know that. I mean, MCE can't be successful if we're not able to offer stable rates for our customers. And the whole purpose of our organization is to offer choice, which creates competition by default. And that is something that we always think about. We always have cost comparisons available to our customers. It's the first question that we have from our customers is, what does it cost? So I do want to reiterate, I think what Dawn said, which is that it didn't become less of a priority for MCE. It will always be a priority. It has to be.
Okay, because I think that's an important point as we go through these budget discussions, because there is right now such a massive gap between us and PG&E that we've not seen before, that question of cost competitiveness and affordability has to be central to all of these discussions. But it sounds, I understand what you're saying there. So,
Yeah.
So thank you.
And it will. I mean, we will be talking about rates. We're going to be studying the foundation today for a deeper rates discussion, and we are going to be bringing options for the board to consider in terms of rate reductions. Yes.
Thanks, Jamie. Is the access service level, is that basically just deep green with a 20% discount?
The green access.
Yes.
Green access. It's different than deep green because it has a different source of energy. It's assigned to a specific renewable project.
Got it.
So the portfolio is different. It's also 100% renewable, but it's similar in that it is 100% and comes at a 20% discount. And eligibility is also different. So it's only available for customers who are on the care or fair discount and live in a disadvantaged community. And I think my colleague Zay wanted to maybe add on to that. Zay,
it's 20% off of the light green product cost.
I'll repeat that.
While receiving deep green.
That's a
Great.
great addition. Thanks for clarifying that. It's 20% off of the light green cost.
That's awesome.
Wasn't on the mic.
Thank you. And then my only other question I know that at one point we had made Deep Green the default, and then we had to basically pause that because we became fully subscribed on Deep Green, is my understanding. Are Deep Green or Green Access fully subscribed right now, or are they close to being fully subscribed?
Green Access, I believe, is fully subscribed right now. I'm getting a yes. Green Access is fully subscribed. Deep Green, we do have room in Deep Green for more customers, so we are allowing folks to sign up for that.
Thank you.
Jamie, we have Director Darling online that would like to speak.
Hi, guys. Thanks, Jamie, for the big overview. Since you're the storyteller, I figure I'll ask you these two questions. Thinking about our storytelling, there's two challenges kind of coming up. One is more an opportunity, and that is how demand management, people used to think of that as being something that's nice to do, but now we're really looking at it as part of our total supply. Have you thought about how the storytelling on moving demand management over to looking at it as a supply? Have you thought about that part of things?
I think for the demand management, in terms of storytelling, the way that we think about it is talking to our customers. I mean, we do advertising and marketing and communications campaigns now every year. We have been doing it through the spring and summer and even the winter to encourage customers to reduce energy during 4 to 9 and to participate in our load shifting programs. We've done television commercials and had funny little jingles and songs even as well, radio ads. And that is something that we include in our marketing. And we can provide some more information for you about that if you're interested.
I've just been thinking that's a good place to start, not only telling people why they're doing it, but showing the benefit to them. Like, yes, here's what we didn't have happen. Then the other part of the storytelling that is going to get really complex, and we dove into this once at a board meeting, as we switch over to hourly reporting, it's going to be a very complicated discussion with customers, because even the board, when we said, well, what electrons are going to your house at 10 o'clock at night, we just wrapped ourselves around the axle. Have you guys thought about that part of things?
Yes, we are thinking about that now. We're working internally and having conversations about how exactly this is going to impact our communications and the messaging that we share about MCE, how it impacts our numbers. We're discussing that cross-departmentally, and we're also discussing it with our sister CCAs. So what's really nice about having all the other CCAs is that we have lots of thought partners and folks who are dealing with this same dilemma, so that we can learn from each other and find the best way that we can communicate that. And like you said, in a way that's digestible and understandable and meaningful to someone who's not doing this every day.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to get rolled out before we actually go to the 24-hour reporting, or as we do that in 2027?
I think that's I think it's going to be to be determined, but I think it'll be a hybrid approach. Like, I think there will be certain folks who we are going to roll that communications piece out in advance, like our Community Power Coalition. And our message to our Community Power Coalition does trickle out into the community, or probably say more than trickle, because they're very, very powerful and have a large reach and impact. But we'll be having that conversation, for example, with our Community Power Coalition. We'll likely be having conversations about it with many of our member cities and towns and counties and your staff, because we work with you all on your greenhouse gas reporting and climate action plans. And so I think that information will go out in phases based on who we're speaking with.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I know our chair has been waiting.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. Back to the energy options for our customers. So you mentioned when a community decides to go with MCE, everyone is automatically put in.
Yes.
And so for those customers that are part of the CARE program, because PG&E also have something similar, do they automatically come over to our CARE program or FARA program?
Yes, that is a great question. So Yes, when customers switch over to MCE, that care discount is seamless and continues with MCE. In fact, we look at all of the programs that the customers are enrolled with PG&E, like whether that's auto bill pay or there's like a balanced payment plan option that sort of levels out your payment over time. And we ensure that those enrollments or programs carry over with MCE. And we have a bonus program that your board has approved, the MCE Cares credit. That's on top of that to offer an even deeper discount.
And then for the deep green option, I noticed there was no premium. So for those customers that's part of CARE or DARE program, do we automatically let them know you can move from light green to deep green at no cost? Or no additional cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when a customer enrolls with MCE, we send out a mailer to them, 2 mailers, I think 1 mailer and 1 email, and it lists all of our costs and information. And it does have information about each of the service options. And I can confirm it, but I do believe that part of the description of Deep Green does say that there's no extra cost for customers enrolled in CARE and FARA. And I'll double check that just to make sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I appreciate the priorities. I think it's really helpful and kind of explicitly talking about governance practices and strengthening them. And why. I'm struggling with number 3 on the strength and energy affordability because as I sit here, I don't know what strengthen really means in this context. And so I think it would be good to have a further dialogue and just even look at the wording on that.
Mm-hmm.
If we really are striving towards transparency and communications, and I know it's a complicated mix, but strengthen doesn't tell me what we're actually aiming for there.
I really appreciate the feedback. And I would just want to reiterate that I welcome all of your feedback. I was thinking about Director Wilkinson's feedback about emphasizing competitive rates and affordability as well. And I hear that feedback. I want to, and I welcome it. I want to mention that what's listed here for the priorities is not the full priority that's written in the plan because some of them are rather long. I'll read to you the strength and energy affordability one in full, and you still might feel the same, but I'll share it with you. It's strengthen energy affordability by expanding access to cost-saving programs and advocating for fair rates to lower customer costs. And if you're like me, I like to see the words on the paper and not just hear them. But they are in our strategic plan, and we can take a look back at that one. I think it is really important, like you said, to support our other priority of governance practices and doing the best we can with transparency and community understanding. So we'll take a look back at that. Thank you.
Because I will say that was, these are actually of a point, because that's actually the reason I was asking about the prioritization, right? Because seeing that third one, as number 3 versus something maybe higher up or equal to the other ones, given the headwinds we're facing, is a bit concerning. I guess that's why I asked about the prioritization.
Yeah.
I actually think the prioritization is going to be important because it's difficult because these are all laudable, terrific goals, but it's going to be really hard. It's really hard to make decisions, especially among everybody, when we have to filter every decision through 7 priorities that are sometimes at odds. And so I think it's going to be really important for us to really understand kind of how we figure this out, right? Because these are all great, but I mean, they're just like, it's so complicated, right? And difficult. It's gonna make some hard trade-offs. Anyway, that was the reason I was asking about the prioritization. I think it'll help us if we can really figure out, and maybe it changes year to year, right? Maybe this is the year of cost of affordability, and next year it's more about programs. I don't know, but I mean, I just think that'll be, so I think that'll be helpful. Anyway.
Yeah, I think you have a really great point. Like we do look at these every year and tweak them a little bit. And I think the order that they're in right now is has been a natural order through our evolution. Like reducing or eliminating greenhouse gas emissions is our mission. So that's always been number 1. And equity, like I said, has always been a core founding value of MCE as well, and affordability. But I take your feedback and appreciate it. And we can think about the prioritization and how we can make it easier for your board to utilize the priorities as you're considering decisions and policies and budget impacts.
Jimmy, can I just jump back into that? Because when you are thinking about priorities, are you thinking about what the customer wants?
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's the that's the number one lens that you're looking at this through in terms of what do we believe our customer base wants?
I think the number one, in a way, yes, but the number one lens we're looking through is our mission. Like, what are we here to do? I think there's more to it. It's like what, how, what, who, why, how, all of those things. But we are here to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. That is our mission. That is the reason, energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. That is our reason for existing.
Right.
And I think what you're saying, how we do that, it's imperative that we consider the customer perspective, because we can't achieve our mission without the customers.
Right.
So I agree. We absolutely are always taking into account customers and that perspective and what their needs are. So I agree, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to just jump in here as the time alert. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. We made a promise to all of you to get you out of here by 2:00. We're about to hear more about customer programs before we move on to our next item, the integrated resource plan. That'll be before lunch. So if we're able to keep moving, if anyone has a burning question or comment, raise your hand. But if not, we're going to roll on to our next presenter. And I just encouraging, as our board members are trickling in, feel free to grab a seat. There's room in the front row, and I think another seat left in the middle row too. We can also clear staff out if needed into the adjacent room to make more room for board members. We want to make sure you guys have a good view. So with that, Jamie, I'll allow you to introduce Alice.
Well, I'm so happy to introduce my colleague, Alice Havenar-Doughton. She is our VP of Customer Programs. She's been with MCE for over a decade. She knows our programs ins and out. She's a technical expert. I'm always amazed by the depth of information that she has at her fingertips. And so here you go, Alice. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. And I just want to share the goal of the next few minutes here is to provide a bit of a deep dive into the programs that MCE offers. And as part of this budget workshop, these programs will be coming back to you in the coming months as line items on the budget. And what I'd like to do today is provide some of the background on those programs, what they've accomplished, what our goals are for them for the future, so that as you're making decisions in the coming months, you have that information underlying, why that is showing up in the budget. And I think, can we go forward to the next slide? Do I have control?
I don't.
We're going to keep on rolling. We're getting to slide number 8. There we go.
Perfect. This is perfect. Okay. So for context around our programs, MCE's programs are funded through 3 main avenues, one being contributions from our ratepayers, and that is really the important point for our conversation today. That is what is going to show up in our budget. That is money that comes either from our Deep Green Fund or from our operational budget into our various program funds and supports programs. We also get a significant amount of money from the California Public Utilities Commission to support our programs. For example, you can see here we have $79 million awarded to us for 2024 through 2027. And over the last couple of years, grants and federal funding have become a more important source of funding for us. And you can see here $14.5 million secured since 2019. And we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so going back to that first bullet of MCE funding that supports programs, that money comes from a combination of contributions from our Deep Green revenue and additional contributions that your board may choose to make into one of our program funds in our fiscal year budget. Our Deep Green premium, half of the 1.25 cents per kWh premium on the Deep Green service goes into the programs fund to support programs. The other half is retained for procurement purposes. To get some sense of scale to that has been $9 million worth of investments to date from our Deep Green sales. Okay, the next couple slides are going to get into details on programs. And before I go into that, I just wanted to also provide a bit of orientation to some of the resources that have been provided to you to If you have more detailed questions, there's been a couple of reports provided. One is a new customer programs update. This was attached to the November board packet. It was also attached to the January board packet, and it is also attached, I believe, to your packet today. And that goes into a lot of detail about all of the programs. The strategic plan has information about our programs more oriented towards the why behind them. So, why did we choose to run these programs? And then the last thing is this PowerPoint has some detailed information in it as well. And this PowerPoint is more oriented around MCE's contributions to programs, because that's where I think you all will have some decisions to make in the coming months. And I wanted to kind of separate that piece out so it's clear to you what MCE's money is supporting amongst all of our programs. And we can move on to the next slide. All right, so within the strategic plan, we have 4 main pillars to our programs. We have virtual power plant strategies, and this is really looking at load shifting. This is connecting programs, kind of going back to Director Darling's question earlier, connecting our programs to our procurement. So how can we use our programs to procure load management in a way that supports our energy procurement activities? Building electrification, supporting electric vehicles, and energy efficiency. And next slide. All right, so starting off with virtual power plant, and we can just keep on going. Our first program under virtual power plant is our energy storage program. This is a program that launched in 2020, had 2 main goals of providing resiliency to our customers following the prevalence of power safety shutoff events and power outages throughout our communities. But it also had the added benefit of adding controllable resources to customer sites that can be used to, shift load away from peak hours. This program, like many of our programs, one thing I will say I think our team is very good at is combining funding sources from multiple locations and weaving them together to make some of this work more affordable, and also not placing the full burden of the programs that we're running on MCE's operational budget. So for many of our programs, they're funded from multiple sources. For example, energy storage, there is some contribution from MCE's Resiliency Fund. We also have a grant from the Marin Community Foundation. We have a grant from the federal government. And we also encouraged our customers to go after other statewide programs like the Self-Generation Incentive Program. But one thing that makes that a little bit tricky is then it can be hard to say, okay, well, exactly what did MCE, like how do we separate out the impacts from MCE's money versus some of these other grants? So the first line here, the energy storage program, this is just looking at MCE's contributions to the programs. Just over $4 million between 2020 and December of 2025. You can see here what the request was in our last fiscal year budget and what the request will be coming to you for the coming fiscal year budget. This program is closed to new applicants. We did a huge push back in 2020. These projects take a very long time to close out, and we're just continuing to work with those customers that got into the program several years ago. And so we will see the cost of this program go down. I think in this coming year, we probably will close out the remainder of projects in this program. Then we have the DOE, the grant from the DOE. This is a $1 million grant. MCE has a match component of $500,000 and $500,000 coming from the federal government. As it shows up in your budget, it will look like $100,000 because that's what we expect to spend out of this in the coming year. And that is going towards 900 kWh of new storage at municipal sites throughout our service area. And next slide. Next in our virtual power plant strategy, we have MCE Sync. This is a managed EV charging program. It's an app. Customers can enroll in the program, and the app on their phone controls their vehicle. So if you have an electric vehicle, you can come home, plug your car in at 5 o'clock, and we will manage the charging so it doesn't actually start until after those rates drop down. We manage it to help customers with their bills, to make smart EV charging easy for our customers. And then we also are able to experiment with things like pushing as much of that charging towards the middle of the day when solar is available as possible. And we also have been testing out dynamic rates, so passing along real-time energy costs to EV drivers. We have a small pilot that's doing that. And overall, they're saving $19 a month by being able to access those real energy rates as opposed to their time of use rate. MCE's cumulative expenditures on this program are over $2 million, and you'll see the proposed budget for next year is $926,000. That's no change over last year. We have currently just under 5,000 vehicles enrolled, with a goal of increasing participation to 7,200. You may wonder why our budget is flat when we have increasing goals. Our partner has a $48 million grant from the California Energy Commission to support this, so our money is leveraged quite a bit. And it's why we're able to continue doing more through this program with flat contributions from MCE. Yeah.
I'm curious, I mean, it's great that money is leveraged, but is this more than just an app? I don't understand why it's $1 million a year for an app. I mean, it seems like a smart app because it can control the thing. Is there like equipment we have to install on the customer side to kind of control the flow, or?
Well, so the $1 million also includes incentives that we pay to customers. So we do give customers a credit for enrolling in the app. It includes all of the technical connections to the vehicles. So the app is connected to the, I don't have the list of vehicles here, but we have a number of vehicles that have a connection to that app. So there's like a lot of work in the background to keep those connections live. It also includes marketing, acquisition for new customers.
So we give them a credit plus they save money on their energy bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
But presumably that helps you with your overall procurement because it's helping you shift energy consumption.
We have shifted, I think, 98% of EV charging for customers who are on this app out of peak periods. So that does help us not have to procure that energy during those times.
Hey, Alice, just a quick question. So I have a Tesla and I also have the MCE app. They do exactly the same thing. So what's the difference? And I'm assuming all the other cars, the electric cars that are out there, have the same thing. You can figure out what time you want to charge them.
So they don't all do the same thing. And I will say I'm an EV driver and I don't have a Tesla. And Tesla is a little bit more sophisticated than some of the other EVs on this front. And so yes, vehicles do have their own programs for this. They don't have the ability to do some of the things that we're doing around like matching to our load. It doesn't give us any insight into how you're using your vehicle. And we aim to have a more user-friendly experience with this that gives us insight into how our customers are charging their vehicles. Thank you. Okay, next slide. Peak Flex, this is a program that pays customers to reduce their demand during peak hours. I'll say this program had a big year in 2022 when there was a huge heat wave. Since then, the results have been fairly limited because we just have had some mild years. So the budget last year was really small. And in the coming year, we actually have some new funding under our energy efficiency portfolio, and this program is shifting there. It's under $100,000 a year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just note that's why it's sort of disappearing from the MCE budget. It's not closing, it's just shifting to our EE portfolio. And next slide. The next one, VPP Flex. So this is a kind of the core VPP program at MCE. We have a large grant from the California Energy Commission to support this work. I think when most of you think of VPP, this is what you're thinking of, where we have a DERMS platform or a centralized control platform, and we are directly enrolling customer equipment into that platform, able to control that equipment directly, as well as potentially even bid it into energy markets and earn money off of that load shifting potential. The funding that shows up in our budget here is match funding to the California Energy Commission grant. And there's no change over last year, although I'll say the grant is really just getting going. So we didn't spend most of that $1 million from last year, and it's sort of been shifted forward to this year in the budget. And next slide. There's a lot of slides here, so I'm going to just keep running through them, but definitely please stop me and ask any questions as we go. So building electrification, we have this Green Workforce Pathways, the workforce development program funded through the CPC Energy Efficiency Program and a Marine Community Foundation grant. This will not show up in the budget in terms of needing contributions from MCE, but it seeks to expand the workforce that's trained and able to install electrification measures. So have some stats here. They're available for you to review. They're also in some of the reports that we've provided. I'm going to keep moving just to keep us focused on the ones that are going to require MCE funding in the coming year. And so next slide. Electrification incentives. So one thing that MCE has done is contributed additional incentives to help motivate our customers to go all electric in their homes and businesses. So we have a combination. We have 2 programs currently, and then I'll explain a little bit about how that's going to show up or what we're recommending for next year. Currently, we have a program that layers extra funding on top of our energy efficiency funds. We're not able to provide much of an incentive through energy efficiency for electrification. So we have these kicker incentives. So we get maybe $400 from our energy efficiency funds, $1,500 from MCE, and it makes a difference in the type of incentive that we can offer customers. So that program, cumulatively, MCE has spent just over $1 million on that program from 2021 through 2025. Next year, we'll be asking for $942,000 to go into that. That'll support 685 electrification measures for our customers. The program that we have been running for 2 years that we are not proposing to run next year is the Emergency Water Heater Loaner Program. This is a really innovative program, and I think we learned some things from implementing it, but it hasn't had significant uptake. This is a program that helped contractors pay to put in a loaner gas water heater in the instance where a water heater failed, to allow time for that customer to upgrade their home to be able to receive an electric water heater. So your water heater fails, maybe you don't have the right electrical setup to get an electric water heater. Contractor will come out, temporarily install a gas water heater while simultaneously upgrading your electrical system, and then come back 6 weeks later and install an electric water heater, and you don't lose access to hot water through that time. The industry seems to be moving more and more towards just trying to narrow that time frame down so that those things can be done in one day versus having 2 installs. So we offered it. We did have some uptake. We had a few contractors who were very interested. A lot of us told it was just too expensive to be doing 2 installs. So given the other opportunities to invest in programs, we're recommending to close that program and shift some of that funding into just the standard electrification incentives. Yeah.
Why do you think it failed? Were they really alerted about what is available to them?
So we were working through contractors. So we did, the idea is to give contractors a tool to sell this to customers. We didn't do a lot of marketing directly to customers. We did do quite a bit of outreach to contractors. And I think most of the feedback about why there wasn't more uptake was that even with our incentive, it was too expensive to sell a customer on 2 water heater installs. So the alternative to make this successful is to increase the incentive level. But given the need for incentives for just straight electrification upgrades, we thought that was a better choice for investing our money.
Thank you.
What is the people have to qualify for, right? They have a financial qualification? Thank you. People have to have a financial qualification for it?
Actually, not for this program, because that challenge is faced by all customers. So this one did not start with any kind of financial qualification.
Okay, thank you.
Many of our programs do, but this one didn't.
I can do. We actually did this in our house a couple of years ago, and just to let you know, I mean, the cost of upgrading your electricity to handle a heat pump water heater so outweighs the cost of a water heater temporarily. It wouldn't have even been worth the time. And in our case, I mean, the provider just give us a free water heater in the interim anyway, because they're making so much money on upgrading your home to handle that load. it's like a rounding error. So I would agree. I think it's probably definitely not worth probably the overhead of doing it, because the people, the subset of the people that would actually really care about it is so small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and moving on. Home energy savings is our next program on the next slide. Again, this is not one that MCE contributes funding towards. This program is supported mainly by our CPUC energy efficiency funds. We have a grant from the Strategic Growth Council that supports some work in Richmond. And we have a grant from Chevron that we recently accepted for this year that will support this work. This is a great program, and I would love to go into detail on it. I'm really proud of it, but since it's not funded by MC and I know we're short on time, I'm going to move on, and hopefully during a board update in the future, I can go into more detail on this program. Next slide is the Multifamily Energy Savings Program. Same boat here. This is a program that doesn't receive direct contributions from MCE. It's supported by our CPUC energy efficiency funds. This is our longest running program. It was our first program that we launched in late 2012, I believe, before my time at MCE. And it's done a lot of great work upgrading multifamily properties around our service area, but not supported through MCE's budget. Moving on to transportation electrification. This is actually one of the more substantial areas that MCE has provided funding for programs over the last several years. In addition to MCE Sync, which kind of falls under our VPP strategy and we talked about earlier, we have an EV charging program and an EV instant rebate program that helps offset the cost of electric vehicles. Our EV charging program, cumulatively, MCE has spent close to $8 million on this since 2019. And you'll see here that our proposed budget is increasing slightly. That is to accommodate just some of the ports in our pipeline and some feedback that we've gotten from the community around supporting level 1 charging, especially as a solution for multifamily properties. I'll have a little bit more detailed information on that, I think, on the next slide. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Quick question, sorry. When we see these goals on these slides, is that from now to April 2027, or is that from the start of the program through April 2027?
Oh, yeah, that is from April 1st of this. It's for the next fiscal year.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so just a little more detail on what goes into the budget behind our EV charging program. On the left column here, you can see what last year's budget supported, and on the right, you can see what we're proposing for next year. The number of level 2 ports, similar. We did increase our incentive level last year. It was the first time we'd done it since we launched the program in 2019, and that was based off a cost study. We had originally proposed, I think, supporting 50% of the cost of the new ports, and with costs going up over time, that had dropped to like 20 to 30%. So we increased the incentive levels a little bit, proposing to do a similar amount next year of level 2 chargers. Level 1 outlets, this is something I know I've heard comments at a few board meetings, members of the public and board members as well, of having interest in this. One of our sister CCAs did a study on this, PCE. They installed level 1 outlets at every parking space at a multifamily property as potentially a better solution for offering EV charging at multifamily properties. So we have also always had an incentive for level 1 charging, but we're proposing to raise it to the same level that PCE offered through their projects to hopefully promote this a little bit more as a solution for our customers. So that would be going from $750 for a level 1 outlet to $2,000 for a level 1 outlet, and proposing to do 46 of those next year. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Liz from Napa County. So I'm not as astute on the level 1, level 2, but the fast charging. First, let me say Napa County, we hear through our Climate Action Committee that, and it's a priority area to expand our EV charging. We're also hearing that the EV chargers, there's not enough fast chargers, and that the chargers are out there, and we're going to be looking into this. Many of them aren't even operating. Do we have any programs that can help mitigate that or support those efforts to really give access, more access?
Yeah, so we do not have an incentive for fast charging, mainly because it is very expensive. And it's certainly something that if there's board interest, we could consider. But the cost of a fast charger can be $100,000 versus, the $8,000 to $15,000 that we're looking. So level 2 is sort of the medium speed. Level 1 is like trickle charging.
Yeah.
So yes, that's not something that we've done in the past just due to the cost. And then maintenance and operations, this has really become an issue, and we're hearing about it from customers as also a barrier. One of the grants we have supporting EV charging is allowing us to offer no-cost charging for multifamily properties in Marin. And the question that comes up all the time is like, how are we going to afford to operate and maintain? Who's going to take care of this, when issues come up? So that is something that we're looking into. We've been exploring, discounting maintenance packages for certain customers, like multifamily properties, probably affordable multifamily properties only. It is very expensive. So yeah, I don't know that we have the perfect solution right now, but just like we're very aware that that is becoming an issue, and also that we want to make sure that we're supporting these charging stations going out in the community, but then that they're there for 5 to 10 years and not out of service.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make a comment. I really appreciate how you're looking at these programs, what's really making an impact towards the high areas of needs for the overall mission of this organization. And if there was shifts, we're going to continue looking at your presentation. Thank you for it. But I would be interested in more investment in the EV charging area and the maintenance that we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Is there any revenue that could be coming in from us installing EV charging stations around the communities that need them?
If we owned the charging stations, that is also not an area that we have explored in a lot of detail due to some of the risk involved in owning equipment like that. So again, that is something that we could look into, but it's not like, I think we would need to own those sites or there are certain contracting agreements actually that could allow us to recoup some funding from them, but that's not something that we have looked into.
Okay, thank you.
Although maybe Alexandra wants to.
Well, perhaps it's so obvious you're not even mentioning it, but there is a value to MCE to install more electrification technologies, because the sale of the electricity that powers the EV or the heat pump water heater or whatever does come back to MCE's generation rate. So there is a little bit of a recoup of costs in that way.
So I was just kind of thinking, if we own the whole cycle, what you're saying, so maybe we look into that. And then being able to compete against ChargePoint and the Teslas and whatever else chargers. Tesla stopped installing new charging stations for a while. They laid off a bunch of people, and I know there's some areas that needed them and nobody was getting them. So maybe we can figure out how do we get a market share of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes.
Oh, I thought that. That's weird. Is this just for multifamily housing or just anywhere? This was under your multifamily section, I think, but I was just kind of understanding where this fits.
Yeah, no, good question. It's actually under our transportation electrification strategy. When we first launched this program, it was limited to multifamily housing from a equity and access perspective, and workplaces from a effort to shift charging to the middle of the day. We have also now expanded it just to places where charging is publicly accessible, like maybe a city facility, a park or something like that, where the public could come in and use the chargers. So those are kind of the three.
But are we deciding where these goes, or somebody's come and finds an opportunity to ask us for funding help?
Yeah. So our customers, if they are interested in installing EV charging, they will come to us. The next kind of offering here that I was going to talk about is technical assistance. So customers can come to us and say, I want to install EV charging. I don't know where to start. We have folks that we can send out to help them do the planning studies. And then not everyone needs that service, and we don't offer that to everyone. There's certain qualifications to get that additional level of support. And then the next phase would be the customer saying, okay, I want to reserve funding for my project. I'm planning on installing EV charging, so we can sort of guarantee, okay, we can pay for this much of the project. Then they go off and do the install.
It's interesting. I mean, there was a thing on the news this morning about how California did install a record number of chargers this year. And I was looking like 26,000 in the first 6 months of 2025. So I'm actually I think Liz's point is interesting because I think, you know what, there's a lot of interest in doing new ones, but the maintenance is the non-sexy stuff, right? And we've heard, I mean, I've heard multiple times, you have a whole row of them, half are a third of them are used, a third of them are broken, and people can't even find one.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not as I said, sexy, or maybe it doesn't have that, but it's like the value is probably making sure these things, the ones we have, are maintained and working versus installing yet another new one that seems like, goes for, I don't know. I'm sure you guys are looking at it, but maybe something to consider. That might be the more value add at this point, as opposed to finding yet more new places, make sure the ones we have are working properly. It's just a thought. I don't know.
I think that's exactly right. And also some of the places where maybe the need is higher, that the question of who's going to maintain this is more of a barrier for those locations to install charging than, let's say, where Tesla is going to go in and put in like a huge bank and they're fine. They know how to maintain that. Yes.
Yes. How are you working with governments and cities with their new requirements from the state?
Good question. I know several of our member agencies have received incentives for us for EV charging. I don't know exactly what we have been doing in terms of like helping cities meet new requirements. I believe that's part of some of the technical assistance reports that we do. I'm just glancing to the back of the room because we do have our program manager for this program here, if she has anything that she'd like to add on that. But I wouldn't say.
As the manager of transportation electrification, I think Alice addressed it. We are working with a lot of our cities. I'll just call out City of Napa specifically. We have helped, just top of mind, cities essentially apply for grant applications, right, through our technical assistance program. And so we're always looking to deepening those opportunities. Related to the new requirements, I think I have to look a bit more into that, but a lot of our municipality partners are EV charging customers as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and then moving on to the next EV program is our EV Instant Rebate Program. This has been a huge program for us. Next slide, please. MCE has spent over $9 million on this program since 2023. And that includes, these stats are coming on a later bullet, but helping over 2,381 low-income customers purchase an electric vehicle. When we first launched this program, it was a mail-in rebate type program where customers would go out, buy a vehicle, and then apply to us for funding after the fact. 3 years ago, we changed it to a dealership point of sale model, which really improved access to this. So customers would go into the dealership and the dealers could educate customers that MCE offered this incentive. It took off. Your board approved adding budget to this program several times over the last 3 years to keep up with demand. And most notably this last summer, when the federal government announced that the tax credits were expiring, we saw, I think, a 280% increase from July to October to the end of September in electric vehicle purchases through our program. And while that did drop off in October, it actually dropped off to a level higher than last October. So we thought it might drop off to close to zero, but people are still buying electric vehicles. They're still going after our rebate, and we did have to pause this program towards the end of last year because it just ran out of funding. So this is definitely a decision point for next year, reopening this program. We have proposed $3.5 million. We're putting in some strategies to kind of tighten up the program, including capping the vehicle cost. There's some other strategies that we can go into as we work through the budget, but last year we did 1,200 rebates, and we're proposing dropping, I think 856 is the number, or 876, sorry, it's right there, for next year.
I'm sorry, does this have income limit or anything?
This is an income qualified program, yeah. And then the next slide, this is our last category of programs, and I'm going to gloss through this pretty quickly because these are also not supported by MCE funds. This is our energy efficiency programs that are CPUC funded. We have energy management programs for large commercial and industrial customers like this winery that is pictured in the background that saved over about 2.5 million kWh and 400,000 therms. We have our flex market programs, a sort of a pay for performance energy efficiency program, and our small business energy advantage program that offers no cost upgrades to small businesses in disadvantaged communities. All right. So those are the programs. Thank you for listening. I know that's a lot of information to put out there all at once. The next slide goes over some options. So, you know, I think we've talked about some of the challenges of the upcoming fiscal year in terms of budget. And I think kind of anticipating where some of your questions may be on if we do need to reduce budget for programs, where would we recommend that we do that? And some of the things that we looked at to come up with these options were kind of the ease of ramping the program down, where we didn't have sort of existing commitments. We looked at the impact on our goals and what those programs have already been able to achieve, also as well as like broader contextual things like what other programs exist to support some of these things. So I don't recommend that we take any of these options. I've obviously put together a plan with my team for next year of what we think we should do, but did want to offer a few options for cost savings if that's the direction that the board wants to go as we move through the budget. So the three options here. One, I mentioned our EV instant rebate program is already paused because we ran out of money this last year. That makes it very easy to keep that program on pause. There aren't really administrative costs of winding it down. We could save up to the whole budget proposed in next year's fiscal budget by not reopening that program. That's almost $3.6 million. However, the impact of that is up to 876 income qualified customers will not receive a rebate from MCE for the purchase of an EV. Also note the state just announced that they will be working towards an EV rebate. I don't have a lot of details on that yet, but that's just sort of another contextual piece to think about in terms of what is available to our customers. The next option is to close the EV charging program to new applicants for the coming fiscal year. That would create savings of up to $800,000. The reason that doesn't save the full proposed budget is we have projects that are already under reservation and that will be closing out in the coming year that we need to honor those commitments to. So that's an option. It will have a larger budget impact actually next fiscal year if we close it to new applicants because those projects often take more than a year to complete. But it would save us some money in the coming year. And I should also note, it's not on the slide, but we have a federal grant that has been a little bit challenging due to, you know, a lot of other issues to access over the past couple of years, but we are still working towards a $2 million federal grant to support EV charging in our service area. So I don't want to bank on that coming through, but that is something that we could see this coming year. And then the last option would be to eliminate electrification incentives. That would save close to $1 million. The impact of eliminating those incentives is twofold. One, so our proposed budget would support 685 electrification measures. So we obviously wouldn't do those. It also has kind of a corollary impact on our CPUC energy efficiency funds because we are adding to the incentive available through those. So it also kind of hurts our ability to spend down the funding that we get from the CPUC because it makes those projects less attractive to customers. And if we took all of these options, the total potential savings is up to $5 million. And then just a little bit more information on the next slide about these three programs that were included in those options. So our EV Instant Rebate program, this is the single program that MCE has spent the most money on, over $9 million. And you can see here, to date, we have supported 2,381 low-income customers to purchase or lease an EV. And the greenhouse gas emissions reductions estimates tied to that is over 7,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The EV charging program, probably our second highest line item in terms of program contributions at close to $8 million. And the total impact of that program to date is 1,400 new charging ports at 142 locations around our service area. And then lastly, the electrification incentives. To date, we've spent over $1 million and supported 700 electrification and electrification readiness measures, and the GHG emissions reduction impact associated with that, 623 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So that's the end of the presentation on customer programs. Happy to take any other questions or feedback. Yes, I guess you can bring it first.
Thanks. Have we done an analysis on lifetime ROI when a customer does buy an EV? To Alexandra's point, right? We're then selling energy to them to charge the EV. So I'm curious, like if our grant is theoretically what might tip somebody over the line of deciding to buy an EV, do we know how much of that we expect to recoup in energy sales over the lifetime of that vehicle?
We haven't done that, and I'm sure it's possible to do it. I think there'd be a lot of uncertainty because we would have to make a lot of assumptions about how that person would use their vehicle, how they would charge their vehicle. So I'm not sure how accurate that assessment would be.
Okay, thank you.
Alice, for the fiscal 27 budget, what is your budget right now for all customer programs using MCE ratepayer money?
It is for the contributions for this coming year, take into consideration the need from the local programs fund and the resiliency fund, minus any remaining balance from previous years, also minus any grant contributions that are going in to offset that. And I am not looking at that number right now, so I'm just going to say it is in the $7.5 to $8 million range in terms of contributions. That information will definitely be coming in future presentations.
And so what you're saying here is of that 7-ish million, we could eliminate more than 5 million by choosing to rein back on these programs. Because the question I had more broadly is, we have a lot of programs, and the ultimate goal, as you say, is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's the agency's purpose. And so when you assess the viability of each of these programs in terms of value add, are you essentially looking at dollars spent per GHG reduction on an hourly basis? Because obviously that's the metric that we're moving forward to. I mean, how are you assessing which programs are valuable and which programs are not? Are you just looking at it through the GHG lens, or are you looking at it through positive externalities as well?
Yeah, this is a question that we get a lot, and I will say there isn't like a formula that is very clean of how we assess programs, mainly because, yes, reducing GHG emissions is our mission and our goal here, but we also have secondary goals, or I probably shouldn't even say secondary goals. We have other priorities and objectives that we are trying to achieve through programs. So equity, supporting our procurement, creating cost savings for our procurement. So some programs may not measure up for the dollars per GHG metric. There may be ones that are an investment for future procurement activities. There's ones that, and this is always a little bit tricky to measure, but are an equity, are meant to support equity, meant to support, healthy air quality impacts in certain communities, things like that. And then the other thing that can make this a little bit complicated is when we accept grant money or when we have the CPUC funding, those have their own set of goals and metrics. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because we want to kind of get funding from different sources and augment what we're doing. But it does mean that we are sometimes achieving multiple goals with a single program. And for example, the CPUC energy efficiency programs have a very in-depth quantitative process for looking at what we're achieving. And the goal there is actually energy efficiency savings. So they are not looking at greenhouse gas emissions reductions. They're looking at energy efficiency and cost effectiveness through a process that tries to estimate how is this going to impact energy costs in the future. And I'm trying not to get too weedy on that answer, but I can if that is.
I know it's a super complicated question, as you've obviously helped think through there, but ultimately isn't the question, is that money better spent here, or is it better spent just on procurement in clean energy, or is it better giving that back to the ratepayer to prevent them from going back to PG&E that might have less of a goal in terms of GHG-free emissions? Does that sound like the correct rubric that you're looking at this from?
I think those are all good questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Geez, yeah. Sorry, there's two red lights and it's very confusing apparently. I think the issue is if you ask the board or whatever, hey, would you like to cut $5 million? I mean, the answer might be yes, right? Because so I think what I think I'm hearing a theme might be, what is the efficacy of the programs, right? And so I appreciate the spirit of this one, because this is like going back to root principles. But if you can't do that, at least do we know, hey, the EV credit that we gave tipped this family that wasn't going to be able to buy an EV. Now they have an EV, right? We don't need to think about the, radical, kind of like how many electrons did we save, whatever. It's like, oh, did it actually help them buy an EV? Or were they going to buy an EV anyway, and we just gave an extra $500 in their pocket? I'm like, I don't really know. And so I think that's I think we need, just previewing, I think what we're going to need is the efficacy, not beyond just numbers. I understand there's numbers. Yeah, we were doing 1,200 last year, we're doing 800, we're projecting 850 this year. That's great. But it's like, is it making a difference? And I think that's kind of what, I don't know how to do that, but that's kind of what we need some sort of metric or something to kind of help us make that decision. Help you, right? Help us make the right decision.
Absolutely.
So.
And the one, something to say about that is that, I think what you're getting at is additionality, right? Like if MC didn't do this, what would have happened in the absence of our incentives being available out there? And I kind of referenced the CPUC and the fairly intense quantitative process we go through there. So there they call it net to gross, right? Like if we're claiming savings for a particular thing that we have done, we may only get to claim 60% of the credit for that because they've done studies to say, okay, we asked this person, what would you have done without this? And maybe 40% of people say, oh, I would have done that anyways. And so we have to discount our program by 40%. That is something that we can do. I think we have to find the right balance between how much it costs to do those studies and kind of this rigid quantification. Those are really expensive. So I totally hear what you're saying. And I think we can definitely look at how can we get more information about additionality on these programs.
Right, because there's another thing which you kind of talked about is plus these things also allow people to consume more electricity, which is kind of good for our bottom line too, right? So there's kind of some multiple things going on, but I think we need more. I think if you just say, here's some programs that cost this much, should we cut them? That's a hard, doesn't feel like we have all the right information. So I think that's what we're kind of struggling with.
Yeah, fair.
And I'm going to jump in here just with my eye on the clock. If there are any board members that haven't weighed in on this yet, would love to hear input. And then also just want to point out that a lot of the good questions and comments that have just come up are really for the board to think about and decide. That's why we're presenting this information to you, to help you make decisions in the next few weeks. And if there's other information that we can offer up to help in that decision making, let us know. But it looks like Director Alicia has a comment.
Thank you again for letting me ask the question. Two things. One, I do think that your outcomes in terms of your measured outcomes, I appreciate those because we're talking about individual lives touched, not to mention the family or the household that also benefits in the children. But so I do think that's important to get person served on an individual basis, unique versus duplicative, because it'd be very difficult to get the cumulative or the recurring impacts on a daily basis, and also your GHG emission reduction. So thank you for those measurements, those metrics. I think those are important. My question is, have we looked at, when you look at the MCE abroad in terms of the different counties and the cities and the priorities that each of those regions have, and again, I'll go back to Napa EV being a high priority for us. And we did that based on a greenhouse gas study of our emissions. Where are most emissions coming from? They're coming from vehicles. They're coming from houses, homes, right? That's number 1, 2, and then 3 is probably landfill, though Napa does a pretty good job there. And then approaching that in terms of the greatest needs and the priorities per climate action committee that's being represented, that's part of this membership, and looking at those priorities that way, in terms of the programming and whether we stick with EV charging or not. I would want to, all things EV, I know that Napa County is a priority area for us. So it'd be interesting to see what the other priority areas are for the other areas that are being represented by MCE. The other question I have or comment, this is based on past experience when I worked for a healthcare system that was nonprofit. Back when, in the good days, we used to take our gross net benefit and we dedicated a certain percentage to community benefit, to the programs, right, out in the community, and financial programs to other local nonprofits. For this health organization, it was 10% plus 1.5% of something else. It was a substantial amount of money. When we're budgeting here and we're looking at prioritization, are we doing this on a percentage base of net gross income? And are we looking at it abroad so there's an equal distribution per representation of cities and counties here?
Yes.
The equity part.
Yeah, we are not necessarily looking at it at a percentage of our revenue, other than the deep green contribution that is half of the premium to the deep green. So there's a premium on deep green sales, 1.25 cents per kWh, half of that goes in. But I will say almost every year the board has decided to invest more than that into programs. So that's not based on a percentage of total, it's based on what are the programs we're proposing and what does it cost to run them. And then,
yeah. Oh, and how are they equally distributed, right? Because again, Napa County would like have a little bit more of a share. Richmond's been very active. They've received a lot of support. So based on the knowledge of each jurisdiction, I would like to see a little bit more equity and looking at this based on populace and the areas, whether cities or counties. So we've got kind of a fair shake versus first come, first serve based on knowledge and understanding and opportunity. So it's just something to think about on the equity lens.
Yeah. On that, just a quick note, in your packets, there's a new table that shows all of our programs and which communities have participated in those programs. It's not a count, it's just a check mark, but that can also give you some sense of, there's no community that hasn't participated in any program. And I think the only program that has a participant in every community is MCE Sync, with EV rebates as a close second. But anyway, that may have interesting information relative to that question.
Thank you.
Yes. It's not on.
I thought it was on. Okay, I guess it goes off. So I was wondering, because you have the cumulative expenditure since 2023, and now the cost of EVs, is going down. So are you adjusting? But also I know that there are less rebates. So do you have the same rebates that you did like in 2023? Are you adjusting that? So that's one of the questions I have. Yeah.
The EV rebate program, the incentive has stayed the same since we launched the program. We did introduce a vehicle cost cap last year. So, we can't have customers buying the most expensive Rivian and then claiming income qualification and taking advantage of our rebate. So there's a cost cap on the vehicle, but the rebate levels have stayed the same. It's $2,500 for a used and $3,500, I believe, for a new vehicle. So it's still a portion of the total vehicle cost.
Right, and this is for low-income customers only, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So because this is for low-income customers, if this is one of the solutions or something that we consider for the budget, would it put at risk any other funding from the CPUC or Marine Community Foundation?
Oh, no, thank you for asking it. So that's actually one of the criteria we looked at in coming up with these 3 recommendations.
Okay.
Is that you don't see any programs on this recommended options list that have grant funding, because that wouldn't be our first recommendation, because that would put us at risk of losing other funding. It would put us at reputational risk for getting future funding. So we don't want to kind of stop our match share component of existing grants that we have going on. But these programs are just MCE fund. We're not losing any grant funding.
Okay, great. And the funding is not, even though it's not directly tied to the program, but it's not indirectly tied based on the other programs that we have, that they are not, that they are funded by the Deep Green.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I was just curious to see, we were talking before about incentives for EV charging stations, and I was wondering if we are connecting with the owners of the multi-units to incentivize them to install, because most of the people are renters, so they are not going to probably invest into a charging station, but I'm curious to see if we are connecting with the landowners or building owners.
That is, so any multifamily sites that we have sponsored the charger, it goes through the property management, not through the individual tenants, because it's a resource for all the tenants to use.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we are ready to move on to our next topic. Thank you so much, Alice. Really appreciate it. Yeah. You gave us all a lot to think about. So I'm going to transition us now to our last topic before lunch. Sabrina Soldavini is our lead on all things policy, all CPUC interface. She is going to introduce the Integrated Resource Plan overview, tell us about it, how the process works, how we interface with the CPUC on this. And the reason why this matters is twofold. First, we are going to be making some procurement decisions over the next couple of weeks in relation to our rate setting and our budget setting. And so it's important to know what is currently in our integrated resource plan. The other reason it's important to talk about this today is that we are at the beginning point of updating our integrated resource plan. We're expecting it to be due to the CPUC around the May timeframe, and we've just received the templates finally. They've been a bit delayed from the CPUC, so we've been a little slower than usual getting this process up and running, but it's about to get going now. So learning about the integrated resource plan is going to serve you in two ways, both for the rate setting, budget setting process, and then for the actual update to our integrated resource plan. So thank you so much, Sabrina, for being with us. I also want to point out we have Vidhi Chadwa on with us as well. She leads our Power Resources Department, and she has been working closely with Sabrina on all the procurement planning, and she'll be here as well to weigh in as we get into the weeds on our procurement. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sabrina. Thank you so much for joining.
And Sabrina, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I apologize for the disruption in the flow here. It looks like we had folks online that wanted to address public comment and that didn't get captured in the last item. So I deeply apologize for this transition, but I'd like to make sure we capture the public comment online. And Alice, we may need to have you pop back up to the front of the room for those questions. So why don't we go ahead and Jessica, will you identify who needs to go?
We have a member of the public, Nick Papas, that would like to speak.
Hi, can
Nick,
you hear me?
you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Nick, we can hear you. And this is as it relates to the previous presentation.
Correct. Actually, going back to Jamie's presentation at the beginning, I don't think there was public comment for that. Just want to make sure that's in scope for this moment.
It is, yes. It was all one presentation with multiple speakers.
Great. Well, hello, this is Nick Papas. Really want to say first, hello, Jamie, and really appreciated your letter in response to the issues that I raised last week. I really appreciate the prompt attention to that. I wanted to go back to the 24/7 hourly discussion. I think you and others are aware that I've been really eager to connect the dots between what I'm doing as an appointee on my town's Climate Action Commission with the forthcoming emissions change to 24/7, less than 2 years away. I think this is a really critical policy change. It really needs, I think, a lot of attention, both from staff and the board. I think as you shared today and has been shared in response to me and others who have been trying to get an impression of what direction we are heading in as this change comes up, MCE does not plan, at least at the staff level, to provide any indicative analysis or insights related to what the 24/7 hourly impact is. That, frankly, is a massive hole in our climate action plan. I think it presents really significant policy issues that the board needs to confront, both around what those numbers are going to be, as well as what procurement you need to do to get there. So this public comment is really a question for you and the team. Is there going to be a process where you engage with that, where you provide that insights? Is that something that the board needs to provide direction to staff to be more engaged with? It's a real issue for our municipality and I think others which are trying to engage with this. I think some of the responses that I've received, which is, well, we can't know yet, that's a little bit challenging for me to hear, given that the templates are approved by the Energy Commission. All of the analytical tools are there. I'm certain that MCE is doing internal and hourly analysis already. We've seen presentations from staff and board packets that reflect that analysis. I don't think there is a lack of ability to know, and I think it's really important to start talking about this in a serious way. Not only that, as I think we'll talk about in IRP, you guys have been doing hourly analysis as part of your IRP requirements now for 7 years. So this is not a new issue. This is not a new topic. I think we all know what direction it's going in, but until we are able to have a more meaningful conversation around it and more meaningful analysis and how that impacts different procurement options, I think we're all kind of flying blind. So just one more plug. I would really appreciate the opportunity for us to engage more meaningfully on this through our climate action plan to get more insights from MCE. I would also elevate this as a really important issue for the board to be more engaged with and thinking about. We are 23 months away from this change. I don't think we can wait 23 months and then hope that, some messaging absolves the need to have planned for it. Appreciate that. Look forward to more discussions about this offline.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comment in the room other than board members? Seeing none, and our clerk has confirmed there's no other raised hands online. Okay, we will go back to the next presentation regarding IRP. Thank you so much, Sabrina and Vidi, for the patience on that, and apologies for disrupting that flow.
Yeah, and actually, as we're jumping in and making that transition, I do want to just respond to the questions that came up just now. And I see Johnny joined us. He may want to weigh in on this as well, as far as the 24/7 pilot. We may want to save this for after we've had a chance to start talking about our integrated resource planning. But I just wanted to respond to the comment that was just made and clarify that we have spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about the 24/7 change that's coming up. We actually have a pilot program that's just getting underway to offer a 24/7 product to a subset of customers. And we've been in discussion with our board about that for quite a while. We have a couple of years worth of presentations that we'd be happy to share if you're having any trouble finding them. I think that the question that Jamie Tuckey was responding to was related to how we're interfacing with the public. And that's something that we really do want to have a lot more dialogue on with our board and with our community and with our Community Power Coalition before we start engaging with the public on it. But we are doing a lot of work building up to that transition. And of course, we'll be reporting out as is required, as everyone will be once the transition happens in 2027. But with that, I will turn it over to Sabrina. And if there's time to get into our 24/7 pilot at the end, I know Johnny's done a lot of work on that, and Vidi may want to come on it as well. But feel free to start at the beginning, Sabrina.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. As Don mentioned, myself and Vidi are going to give kind of a brief overview of the IRP planning process, and we're also joined by Johnny Kipiator, one of our procurement planning managers, and Nathaniel Malcolm, one of our senior commercial counsels as well, who can help answer any questions that anybody may have at the end of the presentation. That said, I know now I'm standing between y'all and lunch, so I will do my best to go through this as quickly and efficiently as possible. All right, so as we discussed a little bit at the past couple of board meetings and XCOM, what is the IRP? So really, IRP, it stands for Integrated Resource Plan, and the IRP process is the process by which, at the very highest level, this is the process that the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, oversees with the goal of identifying a diverse portfolio of resources that allows California to maintain grid reliability while supporting California's greenhouse reduction and emission goals over a long-term planning horizon. Next slide, please. And really, so how does the IRP work? There's two kind of main tracks, which ultimately can impact MCE's procurement, budget, and then ultimately our ratepayers. The first one being the planning track. And the planning track is where the CPUC really builds a holistic plan called a preferred system plan, or a PSP, using long-term forecasts, policy goals, and emission targets. And that preferred system plan is kind of the blueprint for electric grid planning that is used throughout the state. And then individual load serving entities like MCE are then allocated essentially their portion of that future looking plan based on our load forecast and procurement plans. And then LSCs like MCE are required to prepare individual long-term plans that show how we would expect to meet our portion of the grid reliability need and emissions target over that planning horizon. All right. And then importantly, LSE's plans, we kind of flow into the procurement phase here. LSE's plans are then really aggregated and evaluated against this preferred system plan or this blueprint plan that the PUC is looking at for all of the LSEs within their jurisdiction. And this is a really important and critical phase of the IRP, because this is really where ultimately the CPUC will determine if there's a need for additional procurement to fill identified shortfalls in that evaluation when they aggregate up all the individual plans. And this is where we can and have seen mandatory procurement orders come in from the PUC as a result of those identified needs. Next slide, please. I will go maybe very briefly through this slide. This is just a little bit more of in the weeds on that process I just identified. Really, the first step being developing a kind of holistic load forecast, looking out kind of 10 to 20 years based on inputs from the CEC, the California Energy Commission, as well as the California Independent System Operator. And then the CPUC really kind of utilizes some models that it develops with internal and external partners to model many different scenarios based on reliability, targets, emission targets, cost, to identify system needs such as capacity, resource types, transmissions. And just kind of maybe an example of that, there could be a scenario that looks at, we have a policy goal to develop offshore wind. And if we could include more offshore wind in our portfolio, what does that look like? What is the scenario that looks another scenario where we would identify less wind development, kind of low cases, mid cases, and high different scenario cases that are modeled to develop that ultimate preferred system plan, or PSP, that I was talking about. Which really, again, I think the easiest way to think of that is kind of a blueprint that the PUC develops for long-term procurement when it comes to resource mix and timing for future procurement that it would like to see, ideally, to meet reliability, emissions, policy, and cost constraints. And then again, that gets broken down and assigned to individual LSCs who create their own plan, which kind of leads us to the nuts and bolts here for MCE. Next slide, please. How do we actually participate? So taking a quick step back, while MCE, as you all know, is locally governed, and this board has the ultimate authority to make approvals for specific contracts on resources and MCE's procurement activity, the IRP is a mandatory compliance obligation for MCE and all CCAs throughout the state. And as such, MCE is really nearly continuously engaged in advocacy and compliance activity at the CPUC as it relates to the IRP. And as we discussed in a lot more detail at the November board meeting, MCE's engagement on the IRP has really focused on advocating for reasonable forecasting and planning assumptions, as well as fair procurement obligations, as well as preservation of board autonomy as it relates to procurement autonomy for MCE and its governing board. But in terms of the actual IRP that we, as Dawn mentioned, will be updating in the very near future, MCE is required to submit a IRP every 2 years. It's supposed to be every 2 years. You'll notice that our last one was actually done in 2022. There was a bit of a delay in the interim from some CPUC planning processes, but we are indeed scheduled to file an IRP this June at present. So we are in the process of working on that. So as we discussed, after now the PUC has just recently published all of their templates and assumptions, and MCE has been allocated kind of our portion of the preferred system plan, and we're now required to create and submit what's called a conforming portfolio for submission to the CPUC. And that conforming portfolio really will outline what MCE expects it may be able to procure to demonstrate that we can meet our share of statewide reliability and GHG targets. And actually, next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Yeah, thanks. And just by way of example, we've put some information here about what we included in the 2022 IRP. So what MCE's conforming portfolio from our most recent IRP included. And importantly, this portfolio was consistent with all of MCE's operational and policy guidelines, what we used to call our operational IRP, and it satisfied all of our CPUC assigned emissions limitations, energy and reliability requirements. As you'll see, and Vidya will discuss in a moment here, there was approximately 1,100 megawatts of new capacity by 2035 that we projected in our IRP in 2022. And we also noted that we expected to reach 85% renewable energy content by 2029. And what I wanted to highlight here before I turn it over to Vidi is that really importantly, the IRP represents a snapshot in time based on the statewide modeling and plans at the current moment, and not really a direct commitment by MCE to procure exactly what we put in the plan. As you'll see when we bring the 2026 IRP to you, the planning horizon is really long. And in fact, I think this one will go out to 2045. And so, of course, it would actually be rather imprudent, in my opinion, for us to commit to procure exactly what we put in our 2045 IRP. And so really what it represents is kind of a snapshot in time. And then ultimately the resources that we end up procuring, as Vidya will describe, will change based on portfolio needs, market availability, costs, changing internal policies, as well as just updated IRP modeling by the PUC. As I said, this is a kind of a cyclical thing that happens every 2 years. But with that said, I do want to turn it over to Vidya quickly to describe a little bit in more detail on what was in our planned procurement versus our actual procurement to help set us up for specific discussions on potential policy changes to procurement in upcoming meetings, as Dawn alluded to.
Thank you, Sabrina. Hello, everyone. My name is Vidhi Chavla, and I'm the VP of Power Resources. In the next couple of slides, sorry, can we move to the next slide? As Sabrina described, I wanted to just provide an update on what MCE's procurement team has been focused on since we submitted the last IRP to the CPUC and when the board set targets for MCE for renewable content and GHG-free content. So like Sabrina described in her last slide, we, in our conforming portfolio, we were hoping to add about 1,091 megawatts of capacity to our portfolio. And I would highlight that this is more capacity than what we actually had in our portfolio at the time. So at the time, if you look at our last operational plan, the capacity that we had in our portfolio was a little over 750 megawatts. So that was a lot of capacity that we were hoping to add by 2035 and bring online. And then, the CPUC eventually ended up ordering procurement that all LSCs had to do as per the specific timelines and constraints that they set for us. So this portfolio that I am presenting to you and the update that I'm presenting to you today is basically comparing what we have done since the last IRP in terms of meeting the targets that we set in our conforming portfolio and also to meet the CPUC procurement orders that have come to us since then. So as you can see, the 1,091 megawatts that we said that we were going to procure in the IRP is broken down by technology here, that all of this adds up to 1,091. And then on the right-hand side is what you see is what we've contracted for to meet those targets. And this amounts to about a little over 1,050 megawatts of capacity. And, one may ask the question, well, your peak is around, 1,400 megawatts. So like, that's a lot of capacity. I think the answer to the question is that, not all resources contribute up to their max capacity towards the peak. And these resources contribute different amounts during different hours of the day. So that's why you see this technology breakdown that we originally had in our plan that was trying to meet the CPUC IRP emissions goals, which are, like Sabrina explained, it's based on hourly accounting of emissions. So those were the goals that we were trying to meet. So as you can see, we made quite significant progress towards those goals. In fact, we're pretty close to meeting that goal in terms of contracting capacity. But we will be bringing these projects online in the next 6 to 7 years. And in some cases, we've actually exceeded our targets. And that is primarily because of the CPUC procurement orders that we received that actually prescribed the LSCs to buy specific resources. So that's why we had to make that shift in some cases. But primarily, it's also driven by market availability. So in total, about 1,050 megawatts contracted, expected to come online in the next 6 to 7 years. Next slide, please. And then in this slide, I want to shift our focus a little bit towards how we set our internal goals. And in one of the previous slides, Sabrina had mentioned that we have internal operational plans where we set what our portfolio content will be on a year-by-year basis. And this is what you typically see on our power content label. And it basically tells you the story about where we got all our power from, the different power sources that were used to serve our customers. And back in 2022, again, our plan had set up these targets that the board had adopted. And this basically is a snapshot of what we had adopted at that time and the progress that we've made towards those targets. I would like to take a little bit of time to explain this graph because a lot is going on here. So I think I want you to focus on the orange lines and the blue lines, the solid and dashed. And the orange line corresponds to the left-hand side axis that is for renewable targets. And the blue line corresponds to the right-hand axis that is what we as GHG-free targets. Now, one caveat here is that a GHG-free target is not, there's no universal definition for that, and it's an internally defined term for MCE. And so you may not find this term used very universally. So I just want to make that caveat before I explain how we're doing against those targets. So MCE had adopted a target back in 2022 that it wanted to escalate its renewable content to 85% by 2029 and wanted to be at least 95% GHG free. And obviously, I am very happy to report that we have met or exceeded those targets so far. Again, the blue line corresponds to the right-hand side axis. Orange lines correspond to the left-hand side axis. One other thing that I want to note here is this purple line. I don't know, I'm seeing it as purple, but hopefully you can tell it's a different color. So we have since then shifted our 85% renewable target to 2031, which was originally projected to be met by 2029. And that is just for financial planning and rates purposes. that we've moved that target because of the market conditions that we've seen recently that have impacted our costs. So in light of, rising energy costs, we have shifted those targets to 2031 for planning purposes. And I would also highlight that the first 3 years of this purple line is still up for discussion, and it's not written in stone. And we actually will be bringing a few different scenarios on how to set these targets for the next 2 to 3 years. So with that, I want to pass it back to Sabrina. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Next slide, please. All right, so going back to kind of the IRP itself and really the impacts on this planning process on MCE and ultimately, its budget, its ratepayer costs. So again, the IRP is really a process used to demonstrate for MCE that we can and plan to meet reliability and GHG targets set by the state. We also, are able to include all of MCE's individual policies in our portfolio that we present to the CPUC, as Vicky has alluded to in her section there. But really, I think it's important to understand that the IRP, again, as we said, it really directly impacts MCE's operational strategy and budget. It constrains, but does not specifically dictate our future procurement efforts. I think that's kind of the way that I frame it to be the most helpful, that it's a plan that we put forward and that the state works on that absolutely constrains and modifies and influences our procurement, but it doesn't specifically, one for one dictate what we're doing. That said, right, it can and does result in procurement mandates. We've seen that quite a bit. And ultimately, all of this procurement activity really does lead to operational cost increases and budget and rate impacts for MCE and our customers. And can we go to the next slide, please? I just want to highlight this a little bit here in terms of some of these more direct impacts on MCE. I think you've heard us talk quite extensively over the years, some of you, or just recently in many recent meetings about the impacts of IRP procurement orders on MCE. And really, there have been a number of procurement orders, mandatory procurement orders by the PUC starting in 2019. And then there were a couple other additional what are called midterm reliability, or you might have heard MTR orders issued. And then we just also got another procurement order issued in recent weeks, all four of which total over, really 700 megawatts of ordered procurement for MCE. And as you've also heard us describe, I think there are some real affordability and budget and customer impacts of this type of procurement order. From our perspective, while really well intended to ensure reliability throughout the state, procurement orders send a clear market signals to developers that an LSC needs to procure potentially X amount of resources by this particular date, or face economic and reputational penalties by the state. And that it introduces additional demand in an already constrained market, and economic principles would suggest that more competition for scarce resources results in higher costs. I'll note, it's really difficult to directly identify the magnitude of procurement orders on the higher cost resources we've seen in recent years, but certainly there is a high correlation, and economic principles would suggest they are a factor in rising prices and increased and exacerbated affordability concerns throughout the state. So we have next slide, please. Historically advocated that the PUC not implement mandatory procurement orders and instead focus its efforts on implementing stable planning programs such as the new Reliable Clean Power Procurement Program, or RCPP, that it has been working on for a number of years now. Unfortunately, we did just very recently, as this month, receive a new procurement order for an additional 180 megawatts for MCE. to procure by 2032. We're working on responding to that procurement, the proposed decision from the PUC now, though I do expect that, generally speaking, this procurement order will stand. That said, MCE is going to continue to advocate against procurement orders from the PUC, instead advocating for stable procurement programs that don't lead to market shocks and increase prices and exacerbate affordability concerns. Yeah, we'll keep you updated on that as it goes along. Next slide, please. And then really quickly, I just want to mention, outside of the impacts of IRP, what the IRP does not do. Again, I just want to drive this point home. The IRP does not select individual projects or contracts that MCE must procure. Just as a reminder, MCE's procurement authority resides with your board, and however the board delegates such authority, and all future contracts for resources that we plan to procure will continue to follow that approval process as set by your board. The IRP doesn't determine specific or exact cost impacts for MCE. Again, that's just by virtue of it not really selecting individual projects or contracts. It doesn't account for MCE or individual LSE's long-term goals and constraints. The PUC, when it is doing its modeling and creating its preferred system plan, it's using the statewide policy goals. MCE's procurement, of course, has to also account for all of the policies set by your board. And then I think really importantly, and again, why it is really a snapshot in time and why there's going to be changes to what's put in our IRP plan versus what we ultimately procure, doesn't align perfectly with market timing or contract availability. So it doesn't necessarily ensure least cost optimal portfolios for individual LSEs like MCE. Next slide, please. All right, and yeah, the last slide I have, as Don mentioned, really presenting this to you to help kind of inform and ground some future decisions coming your way, but also just because it is an IRP cycle, it's a hot topic, and we will be bringing our 2026 iteration of MCE's IRP to you all, I think in Q2. It is currently scheduled to be due to the PUC on June 1st. It might get pushed out a little bit, but as of now, June 1st, and we'll be working on it, and we are looking forward to those conversations. And with that, happy to turn it over to you all for any questions that you might have on this.
Thanks, Sabrina. Since you all are, and thank you, Vidi, since you all are virtual, we're going to facilitate the question process here. We're going to lean on our clerk, Jessica, to do that. We're going to start in the room with board members, and then we'll jump to online board members and then go for any additional public comment.
Hey, John McCormick, Lafayette. Quick question here. So it sounds like, obviously we're not a big fan of these kind of somewhat arbitrary things coming down from the state, but this is part of long-term planning anyway, right? I mean, does this basically align with what we would be building anyway? I guess I'm a little confused. It sounds like really the big pushback is like, because these are so public, we lose a lot of bargaining power because everybody kind of knows what we need. But I'm assuming with data centers coming online and everything like that, we're going to have to increase our capacity anyway, right? I mean, how does it differ from what we would do left to our own devices?
That's a great question, and Vidi, happy to have you or others weigh in if you want. I think it differs a bit. I think the question that you raise is actually a really important one right now. I think you're hinting at kind of, a statewide load forecast versus an individual LSE's load forecast. And to the point of data centers, we might expect to see that data centers are coming to California in a very large volume, but they may not show up in MCE's service area in a large volume. So the state is going to, currently, the way the state is forecasting and planning is saying, hey, we're expecting all of this data center load growth by 2045, for instance. And that's based on fairly speculative forecasts. We don't know exactly how or where that load is going to show up, who's going to serve it. But the state's planning for statewide reliability needs. And what they're kind of doing right now is based on our current share of load throughout the CPUC's jurisdiction, they're allocating us a portion of that new load growth. We may not necessarily be forecasting as MCE to need to serve that data center load if we're not expecting to see it in our service area. Right now, there's kind of a question of allocation of capacity. And we have been arguing a little bit for, not a little bit, we are arguing as MCE that allocation of need should be based on LSC specific need. That is, if MCE is expected to procure additional capacity, it should be based on MCE's projected load growth, not necessarily the state's projected load growth that we're getting a share of. And so I think in that way, it can differ quite substantially between forecast and actual, especially as we go into the longer planning horizon. Some of that is taken care of by virtue of, we do resource adequacy on a much shorter time period. But so the planning horizon could look a little bit different. Allocation of need is a question, but certainly some of the procurement that's in our resource plan would be done regardless. I think, I'm not sure that's exactly answered your question, but happy to start there.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, and the first one is in relation to the state's projection of this massive growth in load because of data centers. Do you know within that modeling that the state's doing whether they're factoring in the impacts of quantum computing, which will dramatically reduce the amount of load that's needed to serve those centers?
I do not know offhand. Somebody else might know, but if not, happy to look into it.
Yeah, it's just a really tricky thing because if that does come online, then you're potentially facing massive overcapacity in anticipation of something that isn't needed. So I'd be interested to know, to get an answer to that. The second is really about, as you've talked about, potentially shifting targets and goals for MCE. And so as I understand it, we're at the beginning of a 3-year compliance period for RPS purposes, 2025, 2027, correct? And that we, for 2025 at least, will have achieved a renewable portfolio standard well above the state's target for that year. And so my question really is, why would we not, for these remaining 2 years, target a significantly lower target so that over the average of the period, we are A, meeting the state's target, but B, presumably staying with our 60% goal for light green over the period, which would still meet our sort of pledge to consumers, and take all of the savings that we can get from not procuring the PCC1 RECs that we've been using to bump up our renewable content, and take those savings, A, to reduce costs to ratepayers, and B, to focus more on the hourly accounting issue, which is going to be so complicated and potentially will make us look poor compared with PG&E. And so it seems like there should be a shift in priorities there in terms of how we're using money, or or have I not understood it correctly?
I think certainly there are board policy decisions that could be made to shift, those targets. I don't think you've mischaracterized it, but I would defer to Biddy on the specifics of, plans for procurement.
So I know that in the upcoming board workshops, we will be bringing a few different scenarios for board's consideration on what our product content should look like in the upcoming 2 to 3 fiscal years. So that is going to be presented to the board in the coming weeks. So like Sabrina said, I think it is up to the board how we want to adopt those targets and how we want to use short-term PCC1 or index plus energy to meet those targets. So that is definitely going to be discussed in the coming weeks.
And for folks that are interested in a preview, the XCOM packet went out late Monday and has some potential options for the XCOM to start chewing on next week. That same discussion will happen in TechCom on Friday and at the budget workshop on the 11th of February. So we'll be diving into those details at that time.
Yeah, because just on that question, I guess the thing that I'd like to see, and I did briefly look at the XCOM packet, is the maximum amount that we can reduce our procurement costs in relation to the money that we're spending on PCC1 that we don't need to be spending to meet our state goals. Because that to me is the first target for cost cutting, and it would be really good to see what that actual number looks like over the next few years. Thanks.
Any other board questions in the room? I think we have Director Darling online.
Thanks, and thanks, Sabrina. I have to sit here and use all my coffee to think about this. One of the questions I've always had about the IRP process is the CPUC taking a realistic look at the impacts of the grid shortcomings, the curtailment that's going on as they're coming up with these procurement orders in the statewide IRP? Because it seems like if you could get rid of the interconnection delays and the curtailments, we'd be in such a better place. So why beat us up? Why not?
I think it's a fair question. It's a loaded question. I would say to the PUC's credit, they are certainly they are trying to take into account all of those components when they do their modeling, as you might expect. Trying to plan, especially 10 to 20 years out on the California electric grid and plan for reliability, there are a lot of parameters that go into those models, and they're very sophisticated, very wonky. They require continual adjustment, but to your point, they also require a number of assumptions. That's why they run so many different planning scenarios. None of those scenarios are going to be perfect, to say the least, right? They require a lot of assumptions. We ultimately have to pick one of the many scenarios that we can run and utilize it. But importantly, I think something we didn't touch on here is the CPUC's IRP process is also used to inform California Independent System Operator, who kind of is responsible for it. It informs their transmission planning process. To kind of your point, one of the things that the IRP modeling does is inform the CAISO and other stakeholders on, where do we need to build more transmission and these things to avoid these problems of curtailment. It's a really tricky balance to get right, but it is something that is factored into their analysis for sure.
Okay, and then one of your charts had a technology-specific discount, and I'm assuming that's the continual process where by the CPUC looks at it and says, well, that's just standalone solar, so we're going to discount any benefit from that. Is that correct reading of that one?
I think it was on my slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I put it up there. It's a very complicated concept called as the ELCC. I'm not going to go into that. But effective load carrying capacity, in short, is basically how CPUC tells you what your technology is worth in terms of meeting that reliability need. So some technologies, like you pointed out accurately, solar is probably not going to be as effective as wind or geothermal would be very effective. And other technologies like storage also have a discounting factor based on the availability of the charging energy available on the grid. So CPUC actually does studies to calculate what those effective qualifying factors are for each technology. And that's what we have to use in order to meet our compliance requirements for specific technologies that they have asked us to buy.
Okay, that makes sense. And then in the procurement orders, I'm assuming that they're just saying acquire an amount of resources, but they're not specifying whether or not that is new build or use of short-term contracts. Is that correct?
There are requirements for the minimum term for contracts. They all have to have resource adequacy available. And there's also requirements around not necessarily what kind of technologies, but there are parameters that they give us. Like, for example, they would say, we want a zero emitting resource, and only very few technologies like solar plus storage can qualify for that. Or they might say, we want you to procure this much amount of long duration storage, or we want you to procure this much amount of geothermal in specific. So that happens as well. But in terms of new build versus old build, CPUC typically uses a starting point, what they call as a baseline list. And then any resource that's not included in that, only those resources can count towards meeting compliance. So if resources are already on that list, they don't count.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for all this. I'm going to have to drop off, but I really appreciate this, and hopefully I can watch the tape later. And thank you for all my board members there in San Rafael carrying on. Thanks, guys.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any more comments in the room here in San Rafael, but it looks like we have one online. Nick Pappas, go ahead, please. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, this is Nick Pappas again. Appreciate this discussion and just want to raise some discussion around the IRP related to my last comment. I think one of the most important board discussion items for the IRP and for your forward-looking planning is how to address this 24/7 change. I think I'm struggling a little bit with the discussion here and the response to my last comment, where it seems like there's still a foot in the annual emissions and a foot in the hourly emissions. There's pretty clear statutory direction that we are transitioning to hourly emissions in 2028. I understand the response to my prior question as this has been a board discussion for a long time. I just don't know. I haven't seen the board documents. I'm struggling a little bit with that in the context of the requests that I've had as a member of the public to MCE, having responses that essentially imply we can't speculate, we don't know, we'll comply when it gets there. I just can't emphasize enough, in 23 months, all light green customers will no longer be GHG free, even if you hit the graphs, the lines on that graph. And I think that it could not be a bigger board item to weigh in on, request scenarios, request analysis, request discussion that, again, unless I've missed a lot of board discussion to date, I don't think has taken place. I'm not talking about the pilot. I'm talking about the transition that's going to be coming in 2 years that is, front and center to the key points that were raised in the last meeting around climate is our priority, transparency is our priority. This is coming in 23 months. So I really just don't understand how you can have a meaningful discussion about IRP priorities or procurement priorities without some analysis of how your existing contracts and future options inform that procurement and the impacts for customers, for climate action plans, for public perception. Thank you.
Great, thank you. With that, we are going to break for lunch as we don't have any other public comment. Just last minute, no hands. Okay, we're going to go ahead and break for lunch because we have a combination of folks in the room and online. We're going to do a 30-minute lunch. So folks online, we will be resuming the workshop at 1 p.m. All right, folks, thank you so much. Believe that we are back online. We've got our folks online and folks in the room. We're going to go ahead and start the presentations again. Just a quick reminder, this is being held as a public workshop as we don't have quorum of our board. So the request is that board members don't really talk amongst yourselves, but stay for your public comment after each presentation. I think we've got one presentation left, and then we'll hold public comment for board members in the room, board members online, and then public comment for members of the public after that. And with that, I'll pass this over to Dawn and get us going on the final presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catalina. And before I introduce our esteemed colleague, I just wanted to let folks know that we are going to be diving into even more content in budget workshop number 2. So just wanted to give a quick preview on that. We're going to be talking about 5 proposed rate reduction options. These rate reduction options are going to be going to our executive committee on Monday and our technical committee next Friday. So they'll be coming to the full board in budget workshop number 2 on February 11th. So this is a preview / advertisement, and hoping all of you can make it. That workshop will be held in Concord. We will also spend time in that in that meeting, diving into budget elements for the upcoming budget setting process that'll begin in the February board meeting. Just as a reminder, we don't have to make any decisions today, but this is time to really start thinking carefully about all the moving parts that intersect as we do our rate setting and our budget setting. And to give us a really good foundation, we're lucky to have Zeperen here today with us. He leads our customer operations team, which does all sorts of things, interfacing with customers, keeping track of metrics and participation. He handles the call center. So he knows a lot about the nitty-gritty of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And today he's going to talk to you about our current status of rates, billing, and cost context. So I'm going to turn it over to Zay, and we do promise to get you all out of here at 2 o'clock. So keep your questions efficient and succinct if needed. Here you go.
Thank you, Dawn. So what I just heard is Zay, hurry up, which I can do, but I can also get into the weeds as much as needed. Definitely here to answer questions. And to Dawn's point, this, I hope, is the basis for the conversations at XCOM and in our next workshop, because we're talking about the nitty-gritty when it comes to customer-facing, what they're concerned about, what they have. And that third point that we have in our priorities about affordability, which for my team is actually one of our first priorities, along with the education surrounding everything that we do and how affordability is impacted in that. So we'll go ahead and start off with our first slide, and want to kind of give everyone an idea of, okay, who controls what's on the bill? So there are 3 components to every electricity bill. There's transmission, there's delivery, and there's generation. So we at MCE focus on the generation side. So that's our generation rates. That's something that we'll be going through in the budget process, where we'll be looking at what are those, how much is it? Also our service products, our light green, our deep green, our 24/7 that's coming online. And then also our MCE funded programs and discounts. Our CARES credit program, where the board has provided additional support to our most vulnerable customers. Then we have the PG&E side. So that is the transmission and distribution rates. That's the PCIA, that's public purpose programs, as well as additional fees like wildfire mitigation and recovery. And then finally, our customers, their rate selection. Are they on the same rate? Are they on the correct rate? Are they on a rate that is best for them? We have customers with multiple electrification items within their household, whether it be an EV or solar. Is it better to be on a solar rate or on an EV rate? Well, it really depends on that customer. So we're here to provide that support and that understanding. And then also electrification upgrades, any energy efficiency additions that they have in the home, battery storage, for example, where they can also utilize the energy that they're capturing. Next, we're going to go into the bill itself. Next slide, please. So this is the tool of my team. Whenever a customer calls in, this is generally the only page of their bill that they've seen. And that's about 45% of our customers. So over 55% of our customers are on e-bill or on direct pay. So a lot of them don't even see their bill. And so this is sometimes a brand new component. So as you can see here, it has up in the top right-hand corner, the PG&E assigned account number, and then of course the customer's delivery address, their information, also contact information, but then the most important parts. What was my bill last month? Did I pay it all? Do I have anything outstanding? And then what are my charges for this month? And as you can see here, it's separated into PG&E delivery charges, MCE generation charges, and then any gas charges and the total sum. So that is the start of all of our conversations. Next slide. This next slide goes over all of the fees. It's a summary of all the PG&E fees. Up until just a couple of weeks ago, this has been the second page of the bill. This is now the last page of the bill. So just noting that, so if you run home and you pull up your bill, you're like, that's not page 2. It's because it's no longer page 2. But this runs over all of the different fees from wildfire mitigation, PCIA, public purpose funds. This is where you can see it and where it's shown. Next slide. So this is the now page 3, and page 2 is just a lot of information. And this is the PG&E delivery charges page. This is where customers see exactly what they're being charged for when it comes to transmission and delivery. So as you can see, it has their rate schedule. So this is going to tell them if they're on a standard E1 rate, which is a tiered rate, if they're on a time of use rate, there are varying time of use rates. There's A, B, C, D. Some are still going, some are not. That is shown there on the number 5. Then there's the baseline credit. Baseline credit is the amount of baseline electricity that is associated with any given location based on its territory, its climate zone. We have 3 different climate zones within our territories, and those are predicated off of seasonal changes and general use needs. Many folks have also heard of medical baseline. That's also that attribution of if you have a need for electricity due to a medical device, then your baseline will be increased so that you have more support for that imminent need. Then we've got generation credit. So the generation credit on the PG&E side is how much PG&E would charge for the generation of energy for a bundled customer. Now, when CCA started, PG&E already had their entire billing system created. So it was going to be too expensive and too much work to separate all of that out. So what they did was they put in a credit for their established billing system and then added that additional charge in another page so that it would be fair and even for customers. So that's where customers see that. And then we've got the PCIA and then also the franchise fee surcharge. Also note, you'll see there, it shows both the peak and off-peak charges. And of course, that's subject to what season we're talking about. And then over to the right, it has the full amount of usage for the customer. One more addition that we're going to have in March that was sent around in a memo from myself and my team is base services charge. So if we move to the next slide, this is the information around that. So that base services charge is actually going to come into that PG&E slide just above the baseline charge. And so what the base services charge is it's not a new fee, it's the allocation of these fees that have been embedded in delivery and transmission charges. So those are being pulled out and then quantified by themselves so that everyone can understand what those base services charges are. In general, customers will be paying $24, just round about $24 for this charge. Our FARA customers and deed restricted housing customers will be paying around $12, and our care customers will be paying about $6. And then we say roundabout because there can be fluctuations in that based on overall usage, but also how that impacts customers based on their usage. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, a customer that has very low usage is actually going to see a bit of an increase because they weren't being charged for that base charge prior because their usage was so low, they didn't take over any of that. Where you can see our high usage customers are actually going to see a little bit of a reduction so that it all balances out. For everyone here on the board, more than likely you will hear responses more along the lines from our solar customers. Generally speaking, a NIM customer has a monthly minimum charge between $10 and $12. That is going to increase to $24. So, next slide. Here we have our favorite page. That's the MCE customer bill. So much like the PG&E side, it has our peak amounts, total usage, our peak usage, as well as off-peak usage. It has the rate identification number, which is going to be very important in the future when we get to rate hourly rates and their associated cost. Then it also has, and sorry, there's a numbering convention mistake there. So that should be 10, 11, 12, and 13. Then we have the example of where you would find the deep green charges or the deep green premium. And then also have the local utility users tax and also the energy commission tax. And then any discounts or credits that a customer is receiving that are on-bill credits would be seen here in a line item between 11 and 12. Next slide. So here we're going to start changing from, okay, this is the bill and this is what customers are paying, to how does usage and how do those rates impact the total costs? So very proud to introduce you to Jared Sherwood. He is our newly promoted billing manager, has been with the team with MCE just over 6 years, and is here to talk to us about rates, cost, and how those impact customers.
Great, thank you very much, Zay. So as we just went over what a customer sees, we wanted to dive into what impacts that bill. And before we do that, we wanted to make a differentiation between what is a rate versus what is the cost that a customer ultimately pays. So the rate is simply what does the service provider charge per unit of electricity consumed. So that's whether that's for generation services, delivery services, there is a specific price per kilowatt hour of energy or per kilowatt of energy consumed. There are many different types of rates. The most common rates are time of use rates, where that price actually changes throughout the day based upon when you're using that energy. The most common is a 4 to 9 peak time of use rate. There's also net energy metering rates for our solar customers that provide credits at a 1-for-1 rate. There's electric vehicle rates. There's different rates based upon the customer class for a commercial customer. So large businesses actually are charged a different rate than, say, your local small business. So the rate is just one component of what a customer ultimately pays, or the cost of that electricity. So the cost that a customer ultimately pays is not only just that rate, but also a factor of what rate schedule are they on? Are they on this ETOUC rate? Do they have a specified EV rate? Do they have an electrified home appliance rate? How does the customer use their energy? When does that customer use their energy? Has an impact on the overall cost. What is their service option? Are they 100% deep green? Are they on the default light green? Did they choose to go to PG&E? Are they enrolled in any discount programs? The most common programs are our Care and Fair programs, but there's many others. There's the Arrearage Management Plan. There's the Percentage of Income Pilot Program. Many different discount programs that can help customers manage the cost of their bills. And then finally, bills, the cost a customer ultimately pays varies where they live. This impacts the PCIA vintage that a customer is assigned, whether or not a customer has to pay a local utility user tax. And then, as they mentioned, the baseline credit actually varies based upon where a customer lives. Next slide, please. So now we're going to break down what is a rate, what are the components of a rate. And some terminology, when we say a bundled rate, this is what PG&E charges a bundled customer. This is the all-inclusive rate. This includes generation services, transmission and delivery, and a bunch of other fees that we'll go into. And then when we speak of an unbundled rate, we are taking that bundled rate and just taking out the CCA generation costs. And whenever we say the unbundled rate, that is just the bundled rate minus the generation rate for that IOU. And that generation rate is actually what is used to calculate the generation credit that customers see on their bill. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a PG&E E2UC rate schedule. Very daunting, as you can see, but we wanted to show you there are many fees and components that comprise a total rate schedule. So the two main components that we typically see are the generation rate, which encompasses the cost of sourcing electricity to provide to that customer, and then also the transmission and distribution rate. Those are the two main components of a rate that actually vary with the peak and off-peak. The transmission and distribution rate, as we earlier mentioned, is actually going to be bundled up into a base services charge. So this rate will go from a volumetric rate, $1 per kilowatt hour used, to a flat fee for most customers. So this volumetric rate that we see on the tariff will actually, in a few months, be reduced, and we will see a flat fee for most of those customers. And then some of the fees that we see in a rate that we don't typically think of, one is the Public Purpose Programs Fund. So this part of a rate actually funds CARE and FARA and other CPUC programs that support EV adoption, electrification, and many MCE programs that we explained earlier. We receive funds from the CPUC that ultimately are collected through this public purpose program fee. One fee that has increased over the last few years and also is becoming more of a part of rates here in California is wildfire-related charges. And these fees actually support PG&E in recovering costs for system hardening, mitigation, and also for settlement payouts. And then finally, one component of the rate that is actually changing, that has changed for many different vintages, is this power charge and difference adjustment. And the power charge and difference adjustment, the PCIA, that is shown here, this is what the bundled customer gets. And the bundled customer actually is assigned the most recent vintage, which is currently the 2025-26 vintage, which at current moment is about a 1 cent credit. Next slide, please. So now we know all of the different components of a rate. How does this impact a customer's bill? Why do customers' bill vary not only throughout the year, but between different customers? So the main reason we see customers' bills go up and down, and especially just throughout the year, is seasonality. So on this chart here, you'll see with the orange line is a customer's usage profile over the calendar year. During the colder winter months, they are using more energy. During the spring and fall months, when it's typically cooler in our climate, they use less energy. The green bars are that customer's costs. That is, as you can see, directly correlated with how much they use. So as customers use more during the year, their bills go up. You could actually overlay MCE's call center volumes with this chart, and it would have a very strong correlation because as customers get higher bills, they tend to call us. One factor, not just with how much customers use, but time of use rates aren't only varying during the day, but there's actually a summer versus winter component. So for 4 months out of the year, June through September, the rate for the typical residential customer is a few cents more than we charge during the winter. So we tend to see some higher bills during those 4 months as well. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go over a few different examples of a typical MCE customer. And in all of these examples, we're using an average customer that only uses 500 kilowatt hours. So this is the same amount of energy, but in this example, we're showing how a bill can vary based upon when that customer is using their energy. In the first example, in the low peak scenario, this would be a customer who's able to shift most of their load out of that 4 to 9 period. And therefore, they have the opportunity to save $8 to $10 on their bill. And this is simply just behavior, not how much they're using, but rather when they're using their energy. In the opposite scenario, in a customer who uses more energy during that peak 4 to 9 period, they actually would be charged $14 to $20 more, just again, with using the same amount of energy, but that they're using it more in the peak. Time of use rates actually provide an incentive for customers to shift that load and provide an opportunity to save if able to do so. And one other option that we offer, we have specialty rate offerings for electric vehicles and home electrification. These rates actually offer stronger time of use price signals, and this differentiation between a low peak versus high peak customer actually increases. Therefore, the opportunity to save can actually increase for some of these customers who have invested in electrification. Next slide, please. So one other factor that has a varying impact on a customer bill just based upon where they lived and when they joined MCE is the PCIA. So in this scenario, we're still using a 500 kilowatt hour usage customer, but showing you how it can vary based upon where this customer lives. For the 2017 vintage, which is MCE's most populous vintage and compromises a majority of Contra Costa County, they would pay about $18 in this PCIA fee. We compare that to the higher end of the PCIA spectrum. In the 2022 vintage, this fee increases by $8 just because of the PCIA vintage that they were assigned, not because of how much they're using. And then finally, on the lower end of the spectrum, if customers were assigned a 2025 vintage, this would be new construction for most of our territory, they would be actually receiving almost a $5 credit. So just within our own territory, we could have customers paying about a $30 difference just based upon where they live, not having anything to do with how much they're using or when they're using it. Next slide, please. And then, so I think one of the goals of showing you all of the different ways bills can change throughout the year is there's many things that go into a customer's bill beyond just the rates. Discount programs, many that we mentioned, CARE, FARA, AMP. We have actually invested heavily recently into marketing campaigns to spread the message about discount programs, get more people signed up for AMP, get more people enrolled into bill assistance programs. Because we realize that, the rates we're not able to change on a day-to-day basis, but a customer can change their behavior. They can sign up for a more advantageous rates. There are ways for customers to impact their bill outside of the rate. And then I will pass it back over to Zay.
Thanks, Jared. Nice job. All right, moving on to the next slide. So we just got a glimpse of snapshot examples for the PCIA. So we wanted to show you the differentiation across all vintages for the PCIA for 2026. There's been a lot of focus on this at XCOM and our last meetings because this is one of the largest swings that we have ever seen. Right now, we're looking at differentiations year over year between 1.5 to 7.8 cents, which is huge. And it comes mainly because of the CPUC's acceptance and ruling for PG&E to be able to get PCIA fees back from several years ago. So PCIA is a balancing account. It was under collected for the last 2 years, and now PG&E is being allowed to collect in full in this one single year. So that's why we're seeing such a large variation and change. And then we also received a question and ask about what would that weighted average PCIA be, because right now, for comparison's sake, since it's our most populous vintage, we utilize the 2017. But I believe it was Director Nakamura asked, what would that PCIA look like if it was at a weighted average? So that is just over 0.12 cents more per kilowatt hour at 3.783 cents per kilowatt hour. Next slide. So here is our cost comparison as of January 1st. So it's always important to recognize cost comparisons are a snapshot in time. PG&E changes their rates several times per year. They still have a change in March that's coming, as well as a change in September. One thing to note, when it comes to their change in generation rate, we didn't know exactly what was going to be approved or what it was going to be until December 30th of 2025. And there were additional portions to that requested change that are now being pushed over to March and or to September, and we still don't have verification of exactly what that is. One thing that we do know is that PG&E has already submitted for there to be a rate increase for 2027, 28, 29, and 30. So when we look at the decrease that they have made for 2026, they've already stated that the rates in 2027 are going to be, for the most part, the same as 2025. So the decreases for 26 are just going right back up to where they were. So when we think about what we need to do, what we can do, what we will do, very important for us to consider not only the cost, but also the value and the longevity of whatever change we're going to do and how that impacts customers over the long period of time, as well as the acute need right now. If we move to the next slide, that is that transition of value. So it's amazing for me to hear from customers about the impact of rate stability. As Jared talked about, if we put an overlay over those ups and downs across the season, we actually get more calls and complaints surrounding the climate credit than anything else. And that doesn't seem right, right? Well, here's why. Customer gets climate credit. They're banking on their next bill being the same as what they had on their last bill, not knowing or recognizing that they got their climate credit. The next month, their bill's $50 more because they didn't get the $50 credit again. So they're like, why is my bill so high? You just jumped $50. So then we walk them through where they can see the climate credit and allow them to recognize that it's going to come twice a year, right? So that rate stability and that cost stability is extremely important for customers because they are banking on where they're going to put their funds. So I cannot signify that more. And then, of course, what we're providing our customers. Our renewable content is 3 times that of PG&E. We have several customers that call in and talk about their medical needs and their family's medical needs. And when it comes to the rise in asthma, when it comes to the need for rebreathers and breathing help, it's a very large impact for our customers. And then, of course, the reinvestment, everything that Alice talked about, everything that everyone in this room works on and pushes for is huge, from helping our customers electrify to helping them with the affordability of their bills, helping them utilize their solar and their storage with their solar, so that it's the most positive impact for them and that they're getting a return on their investment. And then, most importantly, we're a nonprofit, local, community-based, action-oriented agency with public accountability, with the help and support of this entire board and our customers and constituents. Next slide. So what are the next steps? Dawn already went through them. So we'll have the executive committee meeting on February 2nd. In addition, we'll have the second workshop on February 11th. And then through all of this, we'll want to determine possible reinvestment in MCE CARES credit program. This is a credit program that is near and dear to my heart, because we were faced with a concern and issue during COVID where our customers were struggling badly, both our small business customers and our most vulnerable customers. And the board afforded us the opportunity to try and find a solution, and this was the solution that we found. And I actually just received an email while Jared was presenting, the customer that has received this credit for the last year and a half and wants to know if it's going to be there in April of 2026. We have a lot to get through. And then also determine our generation rates. As Dawn had said, we've got 5 different options to look at, how we can help our customers while also being fiscally prudent for the future of the agency, and also looking at that over the next 3 to 5 years, what that looks like in the entire ecosystem of our customers. And that is that. Thank you. Any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yes, Director Beck.
What do we know about the trajectory or the outlook for PG&E's renewables content?
That's a great question. We don't really get that. It is something that is almost like the white elephant, to be honest. They open it up and there it is. But it rarely jumps a lot. I would say it's in 5 to 6 points change, generally speaking. Yes.
Do you want us to send people to you to help navigate and understand energy bills?
Heck yes.
Okay. And then the other thing is I feel like PG&E gives me a package from their government affairs and says, put this in your newsletter on how to reduce your bill. And I will just confess that for MCE, I've had to search for a little bit. So I would suggest if you can, as this is packaged, say, here is content ready to drop in, and send it to us to share. The more packaged it is, the more likely it will end up in the right place.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for this explanation. This was very helpful for me. I will admit my husband pays the bills. So looking at this statement was like, okay, that's what it looks like. I think that, we know that right now, nationwide, especially in California, that any pocketbook issues is the number one driving issue right now for people. And I heard some reports today in terms of consumer confidence being lower now. Hasn't been this low since 2014 in terms of just overall consumer confidence. And it almost seems like, I think in the mind of people who are trying to pay their bills and figure out what's going to happen in the future, which is a very scary thought, not all the unknowns there. And the implications of that is the mission of MCE is almost a luxury. People are just trying to address their pocketbook issues. I think that we can do both. I really do. And I still think people want to support both. But the one that really makes people kind of nervous is the financial aspect. So I think that being able to educate, I'm glad that you're the go-to to explain the bills or these other questions, the new base rate. I think that's going to create a lot of confusion. And whenever there's confusion, especially this day and age, it triggers fear, which creates more confusion than clarity. So as proactive as we can be, as board members as that we can be, and in terms of just, again, understanding this, I want to thank the staff and Dawn for providing this information. It's very helpful, but just keeping that in mind. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Say, can you provide a little bit more detail on those forecasts for PG&E rates? Because you said they were bouncing up in 27 back to where they were in 25.
Correct. And if I remember correctly off the top of my head, it's a 3.1 to 3.7% increase year over year but they're undulating. I believe it goes 3.7, then it goes 3.1, then it goes 3.2, and then 3.3, but I can send that over to everyone.
Okay, that would be good to see, because I think, we're all thinking about how do we deliver the best product and the cheapest rate to our customers, but also make the agency financially sustainable. And that's a core concern I think for all of us. And so it would be really good to see what our financial forecasts look like on a multi-year basis on the assumptions that you're making about PG&E, the PCIA, everything else, and how that feeds into our overall net position and our reserves. I don't know whether that's planned already, but I think a 1 year isn't enough, given that you seem to know what's coming in terms of those price differences. And then also feeding into that, as we've talked about, what we're going to look like on a GHG-free basis versus PG&E as we enter into that 2028 and beyond period. Because I hear what you're saying about people worrying about asthma and everything else, but that's GHG. It's not renewable. That's the key factor. So that's what we needed to be focusing on as we approach this period where the state seems to be refocusing on the GHG component rather than renewable. And so that's a new paradigm. And as I think public comment has said, we really need to be planning for that, and the board needs to have a lot of transparency around that.
Yeah, most definitely. And thank you for that comment. And I'll just add that the state is refocusing. We are not. So we'll keep that there and in mind when it comes to our interactions with customers and what we're trying to deliver and do. And then when it comes to the rate differentials and the pricing, it just so happens that PG&E delivered multi-year rate changes, and that's why we have a purview into the future. That hasn't been the case in the past. So I just wanted to
okay. And I hear what you're saying there about MCE's internal commitment to being stronger on renewables than the state requires, because my understanding is the state tops out at 60%, and then really the focus is on getting to that 2045 target of zero GHG. So I think that's a board discussion that should be had. There shouldn't just be an underlying assumption that we're targeting something that nobody else is. And that's something that should be brought back to the board.
Not disputing that at all. Yes.
I just want to just kind of go back to what your comment you made during your presentation, or one of you did that. So we have 55% of the customer base does auto pay or does e-billing and doesn't probably really ever see the bill and doesn't really know. I mean, I look at the bill just in like, it's so confusing. And so if we have over half of our customers don't even see the bill, and probably a vast majority don't understand the bill. I mean, you must get this when people call in, they must just not really know what's going on.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's got to be. And I was also surprised that like the difference in price between peak, non-peak wasn't that much. I mean, it's less than 10% of the overall bill, right? There's so much of this that's fixed cost. I mean, we are talking about this, portion, but there's so much of it that doesn't really change anyway. It's like, I don't know, are customers even going to know or notice if we, cut to the bone and drop prices by, 40%? Is it going to make that much of a difference? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We have those conversations with customers every day. And, a lot of it is, oh, well, my neighbor's only paying this much. Well, and that's why we utilize that example. I mean, it's a very narrow example because it's exactly at 500 kilowatts per usage. But generally speaking, neighbor to neighbor is anywhere between 250 to 600 kilowatts in difference, but they think that they're got the same home, right? So there is a lot of education in there. We also received the call of, I didn't sign up for MCE, take this off my bill. So it's that recognition and understanding that it's not an additional charge, because that's the first thought, right? And especially when it comes to changes in the year, like everyone's, okay, I'm going to focus on my finances and I'm going to get rid of my 17 Netflix subscriptions, and I'm going to get through everything. And when you're in the climate that we're in right now, financial climate, that focus is there more and more. And that's why we're here more and more, to answer those questions and help as much as we can. Look at that, I got us out early.
Okay, do we have any other questions in the room? I don't see any. Our clerk has indicated there's no questions online, but we'll just make a last call. Any questions online? Okay, no raised hands. Then we'll conclude public comment and we can conclude this workshop. And Dawn, do you have any parting words before we?
I just want to thank everyone for making the trip to get here. I know it's a lot to dedicate a day. I'm excited we can turn you loose early. If you're hungry for more, take a look at the XCOM packet. There's a lot of detail in there, and we hope to see you all at Budget Workshop #2 in Concord. Thank you.